All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. I ask that you join me for a moment of silence before we do the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you please join me in standing. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, and next we will have roll call.
Commissioner Kelly. Commissioner Kelly.
Present.
Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner O'Connor.
Present.
Commissioner Lanier.
Present.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes.
Commissioner Ripper is absent.
And can I get a motion to excuse Commissioner Rippert, who is out of town?
So moved.
Support. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next, Commissioners, before we get to public comment and before I get to the full agenda, there's an amendment to our agenda tonight where we're going to pull a resolution. City Manager, do you want to?
Sure. So I'm recommending that we pull City Commission Resolution number 1, which is the Lake Michigan Filtration Plant matter. And I would like to recommend that we do that and to provide opportunity for us to have a full commission present to discuss this, provide an opportunity to answer any additional questions that the City Commission might have, and to provide time for additional meeting with the contractors and stakeholders if that's what we choose to do. There is some risk associated with pulling the item, and that has to do with potentially increased cost. The contractors may or may not, it's up to them, choose to withdraw their bid security with no penalty if the award has not been made within 45 days of opening bid, and we're now in day 49, so we're already kind of on the bubble. And also I think, where there's been a lot of discussion about this, and usually when there's this much discussion, it's probably worth thinking about a reset. So my recommendation is to withdraw it from tonight's agenda, to provide staff with any supplemental questions you might have, and I'd be happy to take those, or Jeff McCall is here as well, and we can do it at this meeting or some other time. And direct staff to meet with the contractors involved, and then I would suggest that we refer to the Committee of the Whole on July 24th and move on from there.
Thank you. And I believe several commissioners also wanted to have an additional meeting as well. So, all right, thank you. So the agenda is amended and we'll pull that. So next, before we get to public comment tonight, we have a full house and I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard. So I want to say a couple things about the agenda. If this is your first time attending one of our city commission meetings, I kind of want to walk you through that, make sure you know what you're about to hear and when the appropriate time it is to speak. And then I also wanted to let you know, because we have such a full house, we do have an overflow room, and that is in room 901. And you can watch the proceedings in there, and then when the opportunity for public comment arises where you want to speak, you can come join us in here. That's your choice, and then we'll let you decide that. There are a couple chairs up here in the front still and up here, so if you do want a spot to sit, you're welcome to make your way up front. So if this is the first time that you are attending one of our meetings, let me walk you through the agenda. So on your agenda, we have multiple opportunities for public comment. And the very first opportunity for public comment is if you're here to specifically speak about something that we're voting on tonight. So earlier today, we were all a part of a number of standing committee meetings. During those meetings, we had discussion about items and we cast vote. So those are on the agenda tonight. So if you are here to speak about something that we're actually voting on, the first opportunity for public comment is for that. And then further on in the agenda, we have a scheduled public hearing, and that is a public hearing on proposed zoning ordinance text amendments related to medical marijuana facilities. So that is a little bit later on. I will open up that public hearing after I give our planning director an opportunity to speak. And then the last opportunity for public comment is where you can speak about anything that's on your heart and mind. If it's not on the agenda or if it's not related to the scheduled public hearing, the time for that public comment is at the end of the meeting tonight, or I'd say later on. Not sure how long that will be. So with that, I'm going to open up the first opportunity for public comment. Let me give you a couple other pointers here, or rules, I should say. On the front of the agenda are expectations for procedures for our meetings. So I ask you to take a look at those. And then secondly, when you come up to speak, we ask you to come to this podium right here. That we ask you to speak into the microphone, because sometimes folks in the back can't hear. You'll be given up to 3 minutes to speak, and then we ask you to write your name on the clipboard that's up there. We also ask that you share your name and the city that you live in before you give your comments. So with that, I will open the first opportunity for public comment. So if you're here to speak about something that we're voting on tonight, you're welcome to come forward. We ask that you specifically share what item you're speaking about. So you can say that you want to talk about appointments committee, item number 4, or fiscal committee, item number 2, but we ask that you specifically let us know what item you're speaking to so that we can refer to that in our agenda.
I would like to maybe bring up an email so I could better explain what's going on, maybe another time, but I'm here to speak on C1.
Scott, I know you, but why don't
Yes,
you
my
say
name
your
is
name
Scott
and where you live?
Atchison. I work in Ward 1, grew up in Ward 2, and live in Ward 3. But basically, I'm here to speak to C1, Downtown Improvement District Special Assessment. Downtown Improvement District Special Assessment. Not only do we have the city of Grand Rapids, you're like the body, then we have the arm, which is the Downtown Development Authority, then we have the Downtown Improvement District, it's like a hand on the arm. Then we have downtowngr.org, and we have Downtown Grand Rapids, Inc. But we don't have an information center downtown. I was not planning on coming here tonight. You know, earlier when you guys were going over your budgets, you guys told the DDA that maybe now is the time to have it. I got an email from the DDA director, and I say it's like a stall tactic, a deflection. They want to have another study, update the wayfinding signs. You know, they want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars updating signs, hiring a consultant, having another committee. Only simple things are useful. You need an information center staffed with helpful humans from the Convention and Visitors Bureau right at Rosa Parks Circle. I don't know how many more. Are you going to the DDA meeting tomorrow, Mayor? You know?
It's been canceled.
Oh, it's been canceled. Oh, isn't that nice? But here's another.
Cancel it.
Okay, but I'm saying, every politician up there, do you remember when you told me when you were commissioner it was a great idea to have an information center? Then you became mayor, you were sitting with Mayor Hartwell outside of the Bull's Head. I came up and talked to you guys, and you said, great idea, I like it. Now you're not saying nothing. You're not pulling the Convention and Visitor Bureau, who you guys give money to every year. The Downtown Development Authority, you're supposed to regulate. Why don't we have an information center downtown? Every time there's a concert at the Van Andel, I'm like, Jesus, we got 15,000 people downtown, plus the people who work for the concerts, and no information circuit. And the Downtown Development Authority funds downtowngr.org website, and there they have their restaurants, bars, and cafes. I did a review of it. I found 18 discrepancies. One of them, they still have Kilwins on there is open, and they've been closed for months. They don't have Jolly Pumpkin on there. My point is, it's not efficient. That's what the information center would do every day, let every visitor and resident know what's open. We have one at the airport run by the Convention and Visitors Bureau, but not downtown. I don't know who to talk to. The city, I thought, would be the person that would benefit the most. But it's a deflection. No, it's up to the Downtown Development Authority. It's up to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, up to the Chamber of Commerce. It's up to you. You sit on every board. You like the idea. You need to spearhead it. I'm sorry if I'm sounding a little angry, but another study in updating signs, that's insane.
Thank you, Scott. All right, others who wish to be heard, and this is again on items that we're actually voting on tonight. All right. Oh.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Gary Shank. I'm an attorney. I practice in the area, and I represent VA Ventures. I live in that city township of Ada. I sent you a letter, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody had it and had a chance to read it. And the one point that I wanted to make that I thought was pretty apparent at the last meeting is that there seems to be a mistaken belief that the VA owns and wants the property at 3019 Coit Avenue. They don't. They don't own it. It's owned by VA Ventures, my client, and they don't want it. They've passed 3 times on the opportunity to buy it, including this time. When the church bought it, they had a chance to match the offer.
Madam Mayor, his item is not on the agenda.
You know what, it is. Okay, so, Mr. Miller, I appreciate that. It actually is. It's an ordinance tonight. So, but I'm gonna ask everyone, including you, Mr. Miller, not to get up and speak when somebody else is speaking. Everybody has a right to speak uninterrupted.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's item 11.3. And I wanted to make it clear that we haven't tried to keep it away from the VA. We've offered it to them. They didn't want it. The church wants it, and we hope that tonight you will approve the resolution. We're looking forward to working with the church and getting this matter closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shank. And we did get the communications.
Hello, Julian DeHao from Grand Rapids, the Crescent neighborhood. And I'm here with the Grand Rapids Homes for All. So there are many people who have been working on the residential rental application ordinance and who would like to see it passed tonight, a strong ordinance passed. So if anyone who is with us or would be in agreement would like to stand right now, that might be helpful for the commission to see. Thank you. Dear Mayor Bliss and City Commissioners, representatives from Grand Rapids Homes for All met with the city 3 times to negotiate the terms of the rental application ordinance. We held 3 public meetings to gather feedback from members of each ward and collected nearly 300 signatures of support for an ordinance that would address excessive application fees. Tonight we are submitting a paper copy of the additional 78 signatures collected after the June 12 public hearing. Each time we met with Mr. DeLong and Ms. Wood, we urged them to ban rental application fees altogether. When they refused to work, we worked to make this ordinance as strong as possible. We would like to start by sharing the things that we think are essential that have made it into this ordinance. When passed, this ordinance will prevent landlords and property management companies from profiting from application fees, penalize landlords and property management companies who violate this ordinance with fines ranging from $100 up to $1,000. Allow friends, relatives, and advocates who are assisting a family in crisis to report with them a violation of this ordinance in order to hold predatory landlords and property management companies accountable and deter them from violating the ordinance again. It will stop landlords and property management companies from charging an application fee for individuals or members of a household who will not be signing the lease. This ordinance will also require landlords and property management companies to disclose in writing on the application the criteria used to judge applications, indicating which criteria, if unmet, will result in denial. Disclose the applicant's rights under this new ordinance. Disclose the services used to provide background and credit checks so that people can follow up to find out specifics about why we were denied. Provide an itemized list to prove the cost of the background and/or credit check before the application fee is paid, and return the fee to unscreened applicants no more than 14 days after a tenant is confirmed with a security deposit paid. I'll let Taylor continue.
My name is Taylor Musil. I'm also with Grand Rapids Homes for All, and I live in the city of Grand Rapids. So these protections for prospective renters are very important, but there remains one item that we fought for that we ask you to change even now. Before you vote on this ordinance tonight, a full ban on administrative fees. In the current draft, landlords are still allowed to charge for time they spend looking into rental history and verifying employment, and we consider these fees overhead, part of the basic cost of doing business. Since these expenses reflect individual business decisions, such as the wages and effectiveness of paid employees, we lack confidence that these fees could be accurately and fairly assessed as reasonable or excessive. Finally, we're here to witness one of 2 outcomes: a complete ban on rental application fees or a vote in favor of this ordinance. After hours of negotiation and work on this policy, we continue to maintain that banning the fee is the only way to completely remove this barrier to housing and the easiest way to explain, enforce, and regulate it. We ask that you shift the burden of finding tenants off of families who are struggling to find housing and onto landlords whose businesses require it. Join us today in fearing the fate for our most vulnerable residents more than the possibility of a lawsuit. Landlords will continue to raise the rent as high as the market will allow, regardless of whether we pass a ban or an ordinance. So be bold. You have the power to ban the fee. Short of banning the fee, we agree that limiting the fee, as indicated in this ordinance, is a significant step forward in the effort to ensure that all GR residents can equitably access quality, affordable housing. There are many protections in this ordinance that will discourage predatory practices, allow residents to get their money back in many cases, and hold landlords accountable to a high standard of service. It's necessary to regulate landlords who are taking advantage of our currently unregulated application process to exploit vulnerable applicants for profit and use the tight housing market as an excuse to do so. Thank you.
Thank
Grand
you.
Rapids Homes for All.
Thank you. All right, others who wish to be heard on items that we're actually voting on tonight, and again, if you would just let us know what item you're speaking to.
Hello, my name is Pastor Josh Blount. I'm with Sunshine Community Church, and we're hoping to move into the second ward. I live right now in the township of Caledonia, or the village, or the township of Caledonia. And I'm here to speak about number 11.3, the 3019 Kuwait Plan Redevelopment District issue. And I just wanted to agree with everything Mr. Shank said. That matches my understanding as well. I wanted to add that for us as a church, we're still very excited to see this move forward. We're very hopeful for resolution tonight for a number of reasons, one of which is that this process has been quite long for us, and that means mounting costs that are hard for a nonprofit like us to absorb, especially legal costs. And also, we're eager to begin planning for construction and remodeling, so we're hopeful for resolution. Also wanted to stress, after having listened to some of the comments last time this was on the agenda, that we did reach out to neighbors and notified everyone around as we worked with the Planning Commission. We did hear back from one neighbor. We've met at least 3 times individually with that neighbor, and I think, as I understand it, most of the complaints have to do not so much with our use, but with the idea that the VA would not be using it. Mr. Shank spoke to that, I think, quite eloquently, and so our position is that the zoning issue seems to be quite clear, and we're very hopeful for clear resolution tonight. I want to thank the Commission for their work on it, and let you know I'm available here for any questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, others wish to be heard on items that we're voting on? Hi, welcome.
Hi. My name is Kevin Wright. I am the broker owner of Quest Property Management. We represent 60 plus property owners here in Grand Rapids. Speaking on the application fee ordinance. We have been working closely with Clay Powell and the RPOA in discussing the proposed rental application ordinance. Unfortunately, this afternoon Clay had emailed us the last minute addendums that came out of today's committee of the whole meeting. On Monday, July 9th, the RPOA's Governmental Affairs Committee met to discuss the proposed ordinance. As written at that time, Clay had followed up the meeting with a letter to the commissioners stating the RPOA would be willing to support that ordinance with only 2 very minor changes, one of which would have simply clarified the ordinance to require all rental property owners to follow current state and federal laws, which are already on the books with regard to what information a property owner would be required to provide a denied applicant, and 2, a minor adjustment to the proposed fine for the first and second offenses. Both of these requests were minor and well within reason. Now these last minute amendments changes dramatically, increases the burden this ordinance will cause rental property owners. With regard to the city's desire to force property owners to provide proprietary internal application processing documents to all denied applicants, this is a problem for many reasons. First, we are contractually prohibited from providing applicants with their credit and background reports by the service agreements we have with these third-party reporting agencies with whom we obtain these reports. This ordinance would subject us to potentially potential of losing our ability to pull these reports. That inability alone would literally put us out of business if we can't properly screen applicants. Second, the requirement to release any documentation beyond the notification of denial exposes our business to extreme levels of liability for potential claims of identity theft. This requirement would put every applicant's personal identity at risk if a property owner must produce and send an applicant all application processing documents which are full of personal information. Third, we carry errors and omissions insurance to protect against fraudulent claims brought about from everyday business operations, such as a claim of mishandling applicant's personal information. If our company would be forced to send every denied applicant applicant's personal information, we will likely have our insurance dropped and become uninsurable, as that would be considered extreme exposure to potential claims. Again, threatening our ability to simply remain in business. Fourth, the practice of willing to expose, I apologize. Fourth, the practice of obtaining prior landlord references would be worthless, as no property owner would be willing to expose themselves to potential repercussions knowing that the former residents would be able to see their reference. Gathering personal references is an industry norm and a critical step in appropriately screening applicants, and an important contributor to ensuring community stability. And finally, neither state law nor federal law.
Sorry, Mr. Ray, your time is up. Do you have your statement in writing?
Yes.
Can we have a copy of it?
Sure.
Is that okay? I'd like our city attorney to look at your concerns. Thank you. Thanks. Is Jessica here?
Good evening. My name is Kim Spring. I live in the 2nd Ward, and I'm just here to compliment the democratic process. I have heard from both my commissioners, Commissioner Kelly and Commissioner Jones, that the city wants to hear from their residents. And prior to the recent 3 meetings between the RPOA, the Rental Property Owners Association, Interim City Manager Eric DeLong, and Grand Rapids Homes for All, there was a document that came out that was definitely not people generated. And since the ordinance has come out with a minor few adjustments made in terms of amendments, I think it's very strong. I personally think we shouldn't have an application fee, it should be banned. But given the hesitation on the part of the attorneys for the city, I think this is a really strong first step, and I think it's an indication that our democratic process is working with the city, and power to the people.
Thank you, Ms. Spring.
Good evening. My name is Joyce Daniels. I live in the 3rd Ward. I'm going to make this pretty short. Yesterday I encountered a person, a single mother, as a matter of fact, with 3 children. She is employed very nicely, but she just moved to the city, and she told me, she said, I went to go look at an apartment, and I was told by the landlord, not only, first month, last month, the application fee was well over $100, and he mentioned to her, I'm going to collect 5 different applications, and then I'll make a decision. 5 applications, and they don't get their money back. They don't get any information. That's an important fact. I mean, I understand everybody has mentioned it. People have talked about it, but he actually told her, he decided how much money he was going to need. He only had room for one family, but he was going to take 5. And when you look at that, you look and you wonder, where's the right and wrong in that? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joyce. All right, others who wish to be heard on items we're voting on tonight?
Hello, my name is David Sospek. I'm an attorney with Edward Allen Law. I own property in Grand Rapids, and I'm also a member of ROPA. I share a lot of the comments that the representative from Quest Properties stated, and in addition, Section 2 of the proposed ordinance that reads, rental property owners shall only advertise rental units, receive applications, screen applicants, etc., when the rental properties are actually available and ready for occupancy, appears to prohibit rental property owners from advertising their unit for rent when they know somebody is going to be exiting their lease. That would have an extremely chilling effect of being able to conduct commerce and have landlords be able to have some predictability and know what's going to happen after their current lease expires. My concern isn't related to the application fees or anything related to that. It's just the way that reads, I think could be construed against what I believe is the intent of this ordinance, and would recommend that the city attorney perhaps get a little bit more involved and change that, either the existing language or add some exemption that clearly states, you can still advertise your unit, but if you're going to accept a fee, then you have to wait for this time period or something to that effect. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, others who wish to be heard on items we're voting on?
Good evening, fellow citizens. This is the House of the People. Watchdog Miller reporting. Mr. Shank just sent an email to the veterans community that this has been postponed. The email was as of 5:55. That's obstruction of justice. We filed a document on this. It was coming to my attention since I wrote this up, and Ms. Scott, that the veterans have been kicked out of Shank's crowd kicked veterans out of the Larkin Building without giving their state mandated 30 days, and those veterans were also allowed to protest it in court. So the Larkin Building, by one account, is 70 years old, which gives it special standing. We want to save 4 buildings up there, at least 4 main buildings: Larkin, 3019 Clinic, McLish, and Mann. If our Homes for All People would kindly look into this, either we are up 400 units at that property, 3,000 and 319 Coit, or we're down 400 units. Let's use it well. This is a marvelous opportunity to keep it, and generations of work to keep it. Tonight it appears like we're dealing with pothead priorities here, and the veterans are being pushed.
Let's be respectful to speakers, even if you disagree with them, please.
Being pushed aside. The planning commissioner, director, has met with that community last night all over the place. She's not meeting with veterans. Due process, we better serve of our city's venerable Historic Preservation Commission professionally vetted all the historic considerations and implications. This should go to historic preservation first, and not to planning, which planning meets at early hours, which working class veterans just can't get to those meetings. Could any demolition work discussion be stopped until all excavation findings are in and professionally reviewed? Please scrutinize how Sunshine Church was able to get their hands on a property restricted to veteran use. Nobody in the veteran community is saying the VA wants to. We're saying we veterans are advocating and fighting to keep that property for veterans, as it was dedicated going back to 1885, and there are documents on that going back to about 1885. Veterans are being told that Sunshine Church is already moving in, yet no vote there on the schedule before. That committee up north said that the church has already moved in. What inside information do they possess that this is a done deal? City Development Guru Kara Wood has stated that none of the buildings up there are obsolete, so why knock them down? Who condemned the 3019 Coit property without any public notice? Shank and his crowd has put a condemned sign up in front of the 3019.
Mr. Miller, your time's up. Thank you. All right, anyone else who wishes to be heard on items that we're voting on tonight?
Hello, my name is Martha Cooper. I live in Grand Rapids. I'm part of Homes for All. I'm speaking basically for my own points tonight. I've been before you and been involved in this application fee ordinance. The purpose of this ordinance is to protect the community. We have a serious housing crisis. The rents are going up, whether or not it's like just there's no restraints upon landlords. They're raising fees when there's nothing else to move to. So I was for ban the fee, and got some scribbly notes I'm going to try to get through. So I've been before you asking that you not require people to buying housing, something you can't not buy, to pay for the landlord's business expenses, which is choosing their tenants, with the acknowledging their right or need to protect their investments, their business interests. And since you are obviously unwilling to outright ban the fee, even to the point of going to administering the complaints and violations against property owners on city time, it is obvious that property owners are more of a concern than the people you are writing this ordinance for. At this point, it is hard to tell if we've done a good job or a bad job. Especially with the administration fees being arbitrary and unprovable. If the application fees aren't the cost of doing business, then the cost of office charges, employees, that certainly is the cost of doing business. I don't think there should be any administration fees. I ask that you strike the administration fees. I've got two things I wanted to say here, because while this gentleman is talking about how much it's going to cost, and while we were in the meeting, Mr. DeLong, I grant that he doesn't know, started adding up 25 for this, 25 for the background check. Before long, it's going to be 75 and 100. That's not what we were looking for. We were looking for at least cap them. You are unwilling to do that. So I wanted to say that the cost of it is, when I applied for HUD housing, I had to go get a background check, and it cost me less than $10. And they accepted it. It's a government agency. If that proof is good enough for them, then that's something that the tenant can do on their own. And they can have it dated and all of that and notarized. Also, if I want to, I can print out my credit report free of charge. I can get it notarized for free as well, and I can attach that to the application fee. So those are two fees that you could take off. Another thing about the credit is that it's going to ding that person's credit. It's not going to make their credit look good when all kinds of things are doing. The good faith negotiations. Do not change the language after the meeting, as administration fees were changed after the last meeting, and I did not appreciate that. That's not negotiating in good faith. Another thing here is...
Thank you, your time's up.
Do not threaten people by saying, be careful, the Affordable Housing Committee is next.
Thank you. All right, others who wish to be heard on items that we're voting on?
Hi.
Welcome.
My name is Debra Hawkins. I didn't plan to come here and speak tonight, but just in listening. I live in the city of Kentwood, and I would like to speak on the application fees. I work for a property management company, and I've been in the business for 20 years. I process applications every day. The fees are very imperative for us to have. I do understand that a person can print out their own credit report, but I see fake credit reports every day. There are people in the city who sell check stubs every day, which causes me and my team to further investigate. We have to call and do employment verifications. So I'm not saying that it happens or everyone does do that, but to protect the investors, which we have to do in order to provide housing, we have to be able to screen the applicants. And unfortunately, like I said, I see fake check stubs, fake background checks, fake landlords, and I see it on a daily basis. And it's important that we protect not just the investors, but I'm also a renter, and I want to know who lives next door to me. I want to know where my kids are outside, who's on the block. So the screening is very, very important, and it's not free.
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah. All right, others who wish to be heard on items that we're voting on? Okay, I'm going to close it. Oh, anyone else?
I just have a real quick comment. The applicant, the resolution says that only people who sign the lease can be screened.
Sir, can you start with your name and where you live?
Yes, I'm sorry. My name is Bert Rios. I live in Hudsonville, Michigan, and I represent S&G Property Management. And the concern is it says that only people who sign the lease can be screened, and I would like it to add and co-signers. Some people have bad credit, but they have a relative who will co-sign, and those people need to be screened. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kathy Laporte. I'm a Grand Rapids City resident, Ward 3. I am a residential property manager and owner in the community. I also work in as a housing resource specialist for the Salvation Army. So I have a unique experience from both sides of the field. I see every day, of course I'm speaking on behalf of the rental application fee. I see everyday participants who are draining that precious bit that they have for their security deposit and first month's rent towards application fees, outstanding fees. Now, as property manager, I know that there are costs involved in processing and careful tenant selection. However, the administrative fees that are in this policy or in this ordinance leave it open to too much discretion of the landlords. I've seen a lot of abuse on landlords that we have, and I've seen a lot of mistreatment of that. So if you guys are unwilling to ban the fee completely, and as a landlord, I would welcome a ban. I understand and would accept that as a cost of doing business, just an additional. 4 years ago when I was an avid renter in the city, I could easily rent without an application fee. In fact, I avoided renting at places that had application fees because I didn't want that extra cost. You cannot do that nowadays, in so much that you can even find affordable housing in this city. So I ask that you would consider striking the administrative fee from this ordinance before voting yes on it today. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else who wishes to be heard?
My name is Mrs. Scott, and however, I'm here just to speak about the 3019 Coit property.
Ms. Scott, can you tell us again where you live?
Grand Rapids.
Okay, thank you.
And I actually am directing the comment towards Sunshine Church. Now, however, I know they want to get into the property, and they stated that they are interested in putting the church services in there. However, and they talked to several neighborhoods and several of the neighbors, but that is not true, because I spoke to most of them. I live in the neighborhood, and a lot of them do want to see this property used for veterans. There is 8 churches currently in the neighborhood, all walking distance from that property. There's a chapel at the home for veterans. Why we need 9 in the neighborhood is just obscene. There's no reason for it. With that being said, there are other organizations that are interested in buying the property and using it for veterans use, which is what it's supposed to be used for. It's supposed to be used for veterans. It's deeded restricted. And I just ask that you table this until you see the documentation that will be presented to you showing that it should be used for veterans. Because there's no reason it should get out of the veterans' hands. This property should always be kept for veterans. That's why up to this point in time, it has always been used for the veterans community. Now, if I would have been aware of them voting on this tonight, then I would have sat there and filled this room with many people, because we do have a petition with over 10,000 signatures on this of registered voting people that want to see this property used for veterans. We could have packed the room. If you would care to hear their voices and care to hear their opinions of the registered voting community and neighborhood, then we could have filled this room. However, we did not know it was going to be voted on tonight, so we did not have enough people here to present this. So I just ask that it be tabled until the next meeting, and then it gets voted on when you see the accurate facts on the property, and then vote on it. That's all I'm asking.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Scott, will you make sure you sign in? So I'll remind people a couple times if you forget. That's helpful to our city clerk to make sure we have accurate documentation. Thank you. All right, anyone else?
Hi, my name's Phil Mall. I live in the 1st Ward. I'll be buried on the northeast side. I already own my plots, so I will be a Grand Rapidian forever. Anyway.
Good.
I'm just going to read some excerpts of a letter that I wrote to Kurt, and unfortunately he's not here tonight. And I understand you're hosting Housing for All at the Other Way. And I didn't become aware until the RPOA sent out an email that this whole thing was going on. So I really wasn't part of the RPOA's negotiations and all that. I'm not on the Government Affairs Committee or anything like that. Anyway, I'd like to describe my conundrum as a property manager a little bit line by line as time allows. Before taking a rental application fee, a rental property must disclose to the applicant in writing the criteria in which the application will be judged. That's in the language, at least the previous language, okay? This looks great on its surface, but it feels like it's forcing me to make the decision process a little more black and white than I've tried to be. A definitive line does make the process easier, but that leaves little room for grace and mercy. There are always applicants who are slam dunk perfect, and there are always applicants who are not a chance. But there looks to be a large population of people who fall between these polar opposites. If I am forced to be more cut and dried, I will need to draw the definitive line to a higher standard. This makes the not a chance group larger than it was. When people ask me if I accept people with evictions, my standard answer has been, quote, we look to see what's different from then to now. If I need to have a hard and fast criteria pre-adjudicated, it will become more of an answer of no evictions in the last 3 years. Well, once again, where do these people find that second chance to reestablish themselves? Jumping down as time. If the applicant believes the application fee exceeds the screening process, currently I charge a $30 application fee. With that, I begin a number of verifications inquiries, including running a credit report. This includes ownership verification of addresses, which the city seems to think $75 each is appropriate value for such a task. Attempting to contact them, checking the court websites for issues that may cause issues to either us or the neighborhood during the tenancy, and verifying the income stream is good enough to accommodate their housing budget. I would love to see this tabled until you have a full, in other words, Kurt's not here. And, I don't, this is a big issue, and it's going to affect and gentrify a lot of people that think this is going to benefit them, but it's not. It's going to actually harm them. And I got 6 seconds left.
Yes, you do. Thank you. All right, anyone else who wishes to be heard?
I'm Dwayne DeRue. I live in the 2nd Ward. I'm an owner-occupied. I live underneath the tenant. I feel like my life is going to get over-regulated for me to adequately and safely choose who lives above my head. I have been lied to repeatedly by previous tenants. Social Security numbers don't match up. Lied about, so they gave me false references, called them, vouched that they weren't partiers. They wound up being party princesses. They had to go. And so then I'm going to have to give, the way I'm understanding this, I'm going to have to give everybody thorough written reason why I've denied them tenancy. Even the last round of showing to select the current tenant, I wound up with a weekend stalker because they wanted to have a place to be away from their mother's house where their boyfriend was stalking them. So what is my responsibility then going to be as a property owner to select who lives above my head? I'm feeling very like there's just going to be a lot of regulation, and I don't charge a fee right now because it's just me. It's just for deciding who's upstairs. So of the people who fill out an application, I don't charge a fee. But beyond that, it just seems like some of these things are getting a little onerous, and to what degree do we have to keep regulating and piling on more regulations for what would seem to just be allowing me my reasonable choice for who lives above my head? I'm just wondering, where is that line? And this new ordinance seems like it pushes that line a lot farther out of my control, and it's feeling a little heavy from my side of the equation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dwayne. All right, others who wish to be heard on items that we're voting on tonight?
Yeah.
Mr. Townsend, you coming up? It's good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah. My name is Townsend, Johnny Townsend. I put my name down because I wasn't going to speak until the end. Okay. But I couldn't let this bypass. Okay. I get 10 to 12 fake phone calls a day. Can I get an application fee for that?
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Not sure what item you're speaking to, but I appreciate the smile. Hi, welcome.
Hi, my name is Cindy Hicks. I live in Ward 3. I come from a unique background, living right off South Division on the 1000 block. I live among a lot of poverty. I also have a rental property. After I returned from Guatemala and my spouse was deported, I came back to my rental trashed. I'm also very, very good friends with Martha here. I also allow homeless people to stay in my home because they can't afford application fees. I've also worked for Quest Property Management. I'm also a member of RPOA. I don't currently charge application fees. That is my personal choice. I do understand that people come across a lot of false information. I believe that I really feel deregulation is important as far as I'm more of a person that if we want to solve homeless problem issues and we're all paying taxes, I think people that can't afford application fees should possibly get help from our community development block grant funding that is supposed to help for housing. I used to serve and sit on that board. I'm in the middle of recovering from a major surgery that will take me a year to recover. And the people that I allow stay with me do work exchange. I have not done background checks on them. It can possibly cause a danger to my family, but I'm asking that the committee seriously take a look at the laws with the city attorney. And I personally would not want to be responsible for giving an itemized detail of every single reason why I wouldn't rent to someone. I allow felons in my rental. I have currently refugees. I've rented to an engineer, graduate students from Calvin, nurses downtown, basically, and people that were considered homeless coming out of a hotel. And I have rented to every major race of people that come to see me. I ask for credit reports, which is much more difficult for people with ITIN numbers. I see a huge pile, I feel, of discrimination towards people that have ITINs instead of socials. I feel that the gate should be opened more widely and more accepting. I see a lot of single mothers struggling.
Thank you, Ms. Hicks.
And I have been one of them in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you. And if you would please make sure you just write your name down there on the clipboard, that'd be great. All right, any final comments on items that we're voting on tonight? All right, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Dana Kennedy. I live in Ward 1. I didn't plan on speaking tonight, but I guess I just have a small rebuttal on a couple of things that I've heard from property owners this morning. I've heard a lot of concerns about people not being able to do background checks adequately and worrying about safe people living in their neighborhood. I guess I see this ordinance as just a limitation to costs that they've provided. We're not asking them not to do background checks. We're just asking them to limit the charge that they're giving to what it costs. So I don't see how they can't have a safe environment living around them and do checks on their tenants. From this ordinance, I think it should be passed regardless. Also, the concern about identity theft from the rental owner earlier. I watched the committee of the whole video this morning, and I saw that the wording was changed from required to permitted to send information that was permitted through the state. So if that's a worry, I don't think that information that's not safe to be sent through mail will be. And if so, you guys changed the wording once before. If it's that big of a worry, change it again.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. All right, any final comments on items that we're voting on? If not, I'm going to move forward. No, I'm sorry, one bite at the apple. We got lots of people who want to be heard.
My name is Philip Snyder. I'm a resident of Grand Rapids Burton Heights District, and I'm speaking on behalf of Grand Rapids Socialist Alternative Branch. I came here tonight to stand in solidarity with Homes for All, who have done great work campaigning for this ordinance, and I share their wishes for it to pass as is, if not with stronger language. Obviously, an elimination of application fees would be the only way to truly remove this particular barrier of entry for housing. Perhaps it would even remove some of this quote-unquote onerous regulation that the landlords are complaining about tonight, since then they wouldn't need to supply documentation if they weren't charging fees. But as already been said, it's pretty clear you're probably not going to compromise on that, so I won't press the point. As I read the language today, I was also struck that admin fees can be included. I think that's just wrong. This should be restricted to the cost of credit and background checks, if not eliminated entirely, as I said before. I also think we can go further. Someone mentioned landlords stacking applications to get the multiple fees. In Seattle, my organization spearheaded an ordinance that's not totally unlike this, and that ordinance actually included something where landlords have to accept the first qualified candidate, so they can't stack fees. And it also goes to prevent unconscious bias when they're accepting applications. I also think that landlords should be mandated to advise tenants or applicants of their rights, so it's not just up to the applicant to know it inherently or to look it up. Because maybe they don't have the time, maybe they're struggling to find housing, and they'll just sign whatever document gets put in front of them. And then when they get denied and the landlord's being scummy about it, well, maybe they don't know that they can take it to the city. So I think the landlord should be mandated to tell them of their rights or to include something in the application that advises them that they can express their grievances to the city. And application fees are not the only barrier for low-income tenants by any means. I think let's not forget about move-in fees and deposits. I think that there's a lot more that can be done.
Thank you, Philip. All right. Any other comments? Okay, I'm going to close that public comment period, and that will move us along to our agenda. So, Commissioners, can I get a motion for approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Support. All right. Any questions, comments, changes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to petitions and communications.
First one, communication received from Todd Hurley, Grand Rapids Community College Controller, with an attached copy of a millage levy resolution L 4029, which has been adopted by the Board of Trustees.
That is received and filed.
Number two, communication received from Gary P. Shank, Counsel for VA Venture, Grand Rapids LP, regarding 3019 Coit Avenue, Sunshine Community Church.
And that is received and filed.
Communication received from Grand Rapids Public School Board of Education with enclosed 2018 tax rate request, form and signed 2018 apportionment checklist.
That is received and filed.
Number four, communication received from Tansy Harris regarding affordable housing and the Housing Now recommendations.
That is received and filed.
Number five, communication received from Taylor Musel, Grand Rapids Home for All co-facilitator, regarding the progress being made with the residential rental application ordinance.
That is received and filed.
Number six, communication received from Cynthia Ayers in regards to the proposed human rights ordinance.
That's received and filed.
And number seven, communication received from neighboring community leaders regarding the medical marijuana ordinance.
And that is also received and filed. All right, next that will take us to our reports of city officers.
Number one, Comptroller's report from the period of June 6, 2018 through June 28, 2018 in the amount of $26,080,497.02.
That is received and filed.
Treasurer's report for the period of June 2, 2018 through June 26, 2018.
That is received and filed.
And the city clerk submitted reports, 4 of them, from the Election Commission, appointing election precinct inspectors, designating polling places, designated receiving team members, and designated absent voter counting board members for the August 7, 2018 state primary election.
And that is also received and filed. All right, next up will take us to our consent agenda. So on the consent agenda are items that we voted on earlier during the day in one of our 4 standing committee meetings where the vote was unanimous. So those go on to the consent agenda, and then tonight with one voice vote, those items will be adopted. So can I get a motion for the consent agenda?
Moves.
Support. All right, commissioners, any questions, comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to our ordinances to be adopted.
Ordinance number 1, recommendation number 11 of Housing Advisory Committee Residential Rental Application Ordinance.
So moved. Support. All right, Commissioner Lanier, you want to tell us about this?
Absolutely, Mayor. So this is the residential rental application ordinance that we had quite a bit of public comment on earlier in our meeting. And I think the city attorney's office as well as the city manager can share kind of the updates from our meeting earlier today. And talk about some of the amendments. I know that I was trying to keep notes of some of the comments that were made, but it sounds as though the copy that we have in front of us may not be the most up-to-date copy that people were referencing.
Yeah.
Because there are a couple items that it didn't sound like they were aware that had been updated. So I want to make sure that we go over those few items that were updated within the last 48 hours, because I know those edits were coming in fast and furious. City Manager, if you could do that.
Be happy to, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you.
So today at Committee of the Whole, we looked at a version of the ordinance that was based on the ordinance that was on the printed agenda, but then had certain amendments to it. And those amendments, if you were looking at your ordinance, so the section 1, we added the section 1 title, which is just a ministerial thing to do. So then on the second page, in section 3.
The second paragraph under section 1 was an addition as well.
You have the red line?
That's starting at Committee of the Whole. So if you would like me to talk about you want me to go all the way back to Committee of the Whole today, just talk about those changes and bring them forward?
Yeah, I think, yeah, because.
That's what I'm.
Because as the public, so that happened earlier today, so I would think any change within the last 48 hours kind of helped bring everyone to the same agreement.
That's what I'm trying to do, and
Okay.
I would like to do it by version.
He wants to do it incrementally.
Oh.
What was brought this morning
Okay.
and then what was added at COW.
If that
I can try to
helps
do
you.
it both ways.
No, whatever works.
That could be like playing three-dimensional chess. I could-
Do whatever works for you.
Yeah, whatever works.
Tell you what, I'll do it the way you suggested, Commissioner.
Great.
So on rental application fee, there was an addition this morning at Committee of the Whole. There was an addition to the stakeholder additions. And it states, for purposes of this ordinance, applicants subject to screening are those individuals who sign or intend to sign a lease or other contractual agreement in relation to the rental unit. So that was added today to clarify that who would be subject to the application fee.
And just to clarify, so if there is a co-signer, that was one question that surfaced. If they're signing, they're a co-signer, so they are subject to
Exactly.
an
If
application
their
fee.
income is in some way required to make the rental property contract, then yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So that does it for page 1, I believe. So if we go to page 2, section 3. The next change is the word, if you go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 12th line down, in the sentence it says, a rental property owner shall also provide the applicant with any, will also provide the applicant with any paperwork or copies of electronic correspondence generated as a result of the screening process to the extent in the prior ordinance, the published ordinance said allowed, and the version that is here before you today says permitted. So permitted by state and federal law. And so property owners would not have to disclose things they couldn't disclose. They would only disclose those things that they could disclose. And so and I think most property, most reports come back, they're abandoned in some way, either pass fail or very good risk, good risk, medium risk, that kind of thing. And so I think that's the kind of thing that may be returned, but not the actual, any documents that they may receive that have social security numbers or anything else on them from a credit bureau, for example. So only those things that are permitted by state and federal law, and so we wanted to mimic what state and federal law said. Okay, the same change is included in section 4, and it is near the end of that section, and it says that rental property owner shall also provide the applicant with any paperwork or copies of electronic correspondence generated as a result of the screening process to the extent permitted by state and federal law. So it's exactly the same language, only now it applies to section 4 as well. So moving on to the next page. So now we're in section 9.926, the complaint process, and we're in section 1 of that. We added the language this morning that was prior to the committee of the whole discussion in the 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth line. After the words for evaluating the application, there's a comma, and now it says or believes that the rental property owner has violated any other requirement of this ordinance, and that was added to just to clarify that everybody has to comply with every section of the ordinance, not just this one particular section of the ordinance. And it also now, carrying on in that same sentence, says the applicant may, and in the version before you now, the applicant or his or her representative may, with assistance as needed, within 30 days of the receipt of the denial, file a written complaint. So we've added that today at the request of City Commission. We added kind of the third-party assistance approach. So the third party can't file the complaint, but a complainant may request the assistance of a third party to help them file the complaint. Then, as we move on, we can move to the final page, I believe. And section 3, in the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line down, the one that starts or has 14 calendar days in it. They originally had said from the date of receipt of the application, and that timing wasn't appropriate because you could receive the application 30 or 60 days. It'd take you 30 to 60 days maybe to evaluate it. So the 14 days from the date of the evaluation or the application seemed to be the wrong benchmark. So we added language that says from the date that the rental unit is no longer available in accordance with the meeting set forth in section 9.252, 9.9.252. So and basically what that means is that the rental unit is no longer available if someone has placed a deposit on the rental unit. Mm-hmm. And then in section 4, as a result of discussion with today a committee of the whole, the commission wanted to provide that language in section 4 that says the explanation shall also provide a list of resources that the applicant may use to assist him or her with future application processes. And I think the intent of the commission was to help persons who were denied find resources to help them make sure that perhaps in the future they would not be denied. So find a way to work through things.
And Eric, can I add something?
Sure.
I think it's perfectly appropriate for the city, maybe even community development. I think Connie's on the back there, yep, to come up with a flyer or information that we can give to property owners that they can just give out.
Absolutely.
We know where there are resources. We fund many of those programs through CDBG and Home Dollars and ESG, right. And so I think we can commit to doing that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I don't think our collaboration is done. Because now we have to implement, and to implement is going to be a collaborative process as well. So, and that's just one of the collaborations. We talked today about who has the best knowledge about those resources. It's us, and so we want to provide that information to rental property owners so we get people going in the right direction. So then the other addition this morning was to extend the effective date. So a normal effective date of an ordinance that we adopt is 30 days, and that would be way too fast. So what we've suggested here is that the ordinance will become effective November 7th, 2018, which is 120 days. And we believe that should give us appropriate time to work in a collaborative way to put the process together that are required to make this work. And if I could, I think I've clarified that some of the points that were brought up during the public comment, which I really appreciate. So about only required to provide those things which are permitted by law to be disclosed. So nothing beyond that. Then the word, allowed is pretty passive. That was the word that was in before. It was requested to have the word required, and I think the word permitted is a good compromise in between there. So still, it means that they can only do those things that they can do by state and federal law, which is, I think, the spirit of what the persons who made that recommendation were talking about. And we've talked about the co-signer question, and I think maybe I'll stop there and see if there are any more questions. Thank you.
Commissioner?
There was also a question that came up regarding Section 2, so the beginning of the ordinance, and the gentleman who spoke made mention of how the first sentence in Section 2 is written, that it may limit when a landlord could advertise. And so I think that's worth having some conversation, as opposed to letting the property, I think it says when it's actually available. And so if the tenant has already given a 30-day notice or whatever the requirement is to say that they're no longer planning to live there or they're not renewing their lease, I think that we need to consider making room for that to be the point in which it's considered no longer actually available, as opposed to when it's vacated. I don't.
So,
what was that?
if I could speak to that, please.
Mm-hmm.
So we did in the work group have a discussion about that.
Okay.
And we, perhaps inartfully, tried to deal with it by the phrase that says, unless applicants consent in writing to being added to a waiting list. So if you read the first sentence, where it says the owner shall only advertise rental units, receive applications, et cetera, for when such rental properties are actually available for occupancy, comma, unless applicants consent in writing to being added to a waiting list. So if somebody knew that something was coming available, we could go on a waiting list for that unit. So that was our attempt to do two things. One, to address that issue, and also sometimes tenants just say, I really like this property, I'd like to be here sometime. So I know you don't have a unit available now, but I'd like to be on a list. So we perhaps could address it also in the definition. So which I think comes on this side.
I circled that too and made that comment from the feedback tonight. It is, if you know a lease is coming up and you're going to have a unit available in 30 or 60 days, you want to advertise that you have an opening coming up.
Mm-hmm. So it's vacant.
So it does. That does seem odd that we would say you can't even advertise a unit until it's empty and available for rent.
Yeah, and I think what's also interesting there is that it having to say that there's a waiting list or that I'm collecting names for a waiting list, I think it opens up confusion. So, if we think that it's acceptable for a landlord to accept applications prior to, in the event that their existing tenant has determined that they're no longer going to stay, if that's acceptable, then we need to explicitly state that. Because I think if it's assumed in this waiting list language, when we're all not sitting up here, then there's going to be confusion later about what was acceptable and what wasn't. And so if it's something that we're saying, we recognize that this is a concern and we are okay with addressing it, let's just spell it out.
Yeah, like even
I'm
rental
working on
property
some
owners or advertised rental units that are to be vacated within a certain 30 days or 45 days or, I just think having some clarity around that.
I mean, and also, I mean, what about the case of new construction, you know? What about when Link or ICCF is building a building and
They have
you know,
45 units.
there are 45 units and they're 6 months from being done, but, you know, people start taking applications for things and
But that's a true waiting list.
Yeah.
I think that one is covered here, but, you know, a single unit that someone is saying they're not gonna stay after 30 days isn't truly a waiting list. But I think those are waiting lists.
Okay.
So if we wanted to add some language like that,
Let's hear Commissioner Kelly.
Yeah, I actually am responding to a comment that Eric, you just made, our interim city manager, that maybe what we need is a definition for actually available that is attached to this, because it sounds like there can be more than one scenario. And rather than adding all this language, if we have an asterisk and we add a definition around that to what, you know, to clarify what that means, because again, as you pointed out, Commissioner Lanier, there could be a waiting list for what Commissioner O'Connor just said if there's a building being built. But that's vague, and I don't know how, either in this paragraph or else, I kind of liked your idea of just adding a definition, because there could be a variety of situations.
I don't know, we'll have to ask Jessica, perhaps. I don't know that it adds anything or not. So I do have a suggestion of potential language, and we can decide if we want to put it in tonight or do it at some other point.
Okay.
But one way to get to the point that Commissioner Lanier mentioned, and we just talked about, is if you said something like this: for purposes of this ordinance, a rental unit may be considered available if a tenant of a unit has declared they will not be renewing a lease. So then that's the situation we were talking about, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I think that really gets to the practice, right? You know somebody's
and I think we could add
moving out
that
at a
right after
certain
that.
time.
Well, we could add it right in that paragraph if we wanted to.
At the end of 2.
Yeah, we could put it right after, so we have the one part of the definition is, which says for purposes of this ordinance, the rental unit is no longer considered available. We've got that piece. And then, you know, we could add this piece right after that that says for purposes of this ordinance, a rental unit may be considered available if a tenant of a unit has declared they will not be renewing a lease.
Yeah. I think that clarifies. Commissioner O'Connor?
I'll wait for a second.
Okay. All right. So if somebody wants to make a motion to add that language, we can do that, or we can continue talking about the overall ordinance.
Well, I think we can finish talking about it just in case there are some other edits, but I made the original motion, so I will amend it with whatever edits. Mr. City Clerk?
All right, do I have a second?
Yes, second.
Okay, all right. So the amended ordinance language is before us. Did you want to, anyone else?
Oh.
Any other comments?
About the ordinance itself as a whole?
Yes,
Yeah,
ordinance
well, I mean,
as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just want to speak to what Mr. Mole talked about. And I do feel like there's the danger of that. I mean, I think that's been some of my apprehension since we started this conversation, is by making things very explicit, I think you're going to, you know, I think you saw that happen during the mortgage crisis, right? My background's I'm a real estate appraiser by trade, real estate broker. I've seen it. Like, when it went down and banks lost billions upon billions of dollars, when people started, and we're still seeing it today, the impacts of the availability of a mortgage, the strictness by which people are now judged increased to a whole different threshold. That you used to be able to, I mean, and it's this balance between finding discretion to give people a chance, and when you make things so black and white that discretion is lost, people then become unqualified because of that, because people get too rigid in the qualification. And we saw that with the availability of mortgages in 2010, 11, 12. I mean, it's just now getting to the point where, you know, for all intents and purposes, prime, like subprime mortgage market was there for a reason. Even though there were high cost, high interest loans, it gave people who had dings on their credit the opportunity to buy a house, to rebuild their credit, and then they all lost it, right? But it gave people an option. When the subprime mortgage market went away, people who were on the fringe and maybe were making some money and could afford it with a couple of incomes, they no longer have that opportunity. And so I'm scared about this ordinance, that it's going to have that same impact, that we're going to put something in place that's going to create a very, very rigid system that's going to give again, you're trying to regulate out the bad landlords, and the good landlords are going to be impacted by it, and they're just going to, you know, you're going to take all discretion out of it, and it's going to have a really negative impact on our available rental market. And
you know what? It's our time to talk right now. So please let us have this conversation. I really appreciate all of your input. I know a lot of people have worked really hard on this, and we deeply appreciate that. And we're trying to work through the ordinance based on the continued feedback that we've heard tonight. So I'm going to ask you to just give us an opportunity to do that. Okay, Commissioner Lanier, you had a response.
Yeah, so I actually really have a question. So I think the section that you're referring to, or that he was referring to, is section 4, and it's the last section of the ordinance that we have in front of us. And so I think, you know, the language he used was that it will limit flexibility. And my counter language would be it eliminates subjectivity. So, you know, in some ways I understand that, you know, having something in black and white restricts, but when you're on the receiving end of inequities, you'd rather there be a consistent approach for everyone than you feeling as though you're being treated differently. And so, you know, I don't know, I think you're right in that it will become more black and white, but I think in some ways having a clear understanding of why someone wasn't selected and having a rental property owner to determine their own standard for that so that they can consistently share the same message every time they're making the decision. I actually think it'll also help them to determine, okay, is this too rigid of an expectation that I have based on the number of people that you're either A, turning down or having to weed out. So I hear the concern, but I look at it as eliminating subjectivity, which is causing a lot of inequities.
You know, that leads me to think of something we talk around this table about a lot, and that is how do we have metrics? How do we measure the impact of some of the ordinances or some of the policies that we pass? And so I'm curious, Eric, if there have been conversations about how do we measure the effectiveness of this ordinance and the impact, and be able to identify if there are unintended consequences so that we can revisit it. I mean, that's the reality of the work that we do. We amend ordinances, we amend policies all the time based on what we learn after they are implemented. And so I'm curious if there have been any conversations about how do we capture feedback on the effectiveness of this, and maybe if there hasn't been conversations, we clearly have some time before November to maybe think through.
So, thank you. So that's, of course, we would do that, and I think, you know, I was planning to do it during this period of time of rolling it out. So part of the process we'll be going through is creating the format for what the application, you know, what the disclosure will look like, what the information we'll be providing will include, and I think, you know, we'll want to see how that's accepted and how easy it is to use, and I think we'll do that by user testing, you know, so because we have landlords who will be using it and we have applicants who will be using it, so we'll try to find out how that works. We'll also have probably a series of complaints we've investigated, and so we'll see, you know, what are the pain points, what, you know, and we'll hear from landlords about what were applicants, where we missed the mark as we go through this process. So we do need to evaluate this. This is new policy, just like the entire Housing Now package is all brand new. And we've got to keep track of all of that, really, to see if it's doing what we intended it to do. So there will be an evaluation.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Mayor, just one more
Commissioner?
comment. I think in this market where landlords are able to charge more than they were a few years ago, it may be that perhaps some will not charge the application fee because why bother if it's too complicated? So there's also that possibility. They might just say, I'm going to go through this, but I'm not going to charge you because then I have to give you all this paperwork back, and that would be fine.
And they'll just tack it onto the rent at the end of the month.
Yeah, well, we don't know. I mean, I think market drives the rent prices more than anything. I disagree with you on that, John.
Yeah, but getting
No.
we've all heard heard a lot of input on this, and we've all been a part of these conversations for several years. And I feel pretty strongly that if somebody is denied, they need to know why, so that they have an opportunity to fix it, so that they have the opportunity to get into housing. And for individuals who are not that are not given that information and aren't given an opportunity to work with somebody to expunge something or address something that's inaccurate, that is a part of the problem, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, well said, Mayor, and I think that we are going to continue to see monitoring not only by the city, but by Homes for All and by RPOA, and then we can have more conversations about how this is working. We have to take a stab at this. We have been asked and asked and asked. So.
Yep. Any final comments or questions?
So I'm curious then, Mayor, I know in some of our other ordinances, newer ordinances, we have like an expiration in which the evaluation of that ordinance will take place so that it's clear.
Mm-hmm.
There's no confusion. We know it, and then it'll come back to us exactly when we want it. So do we want to add something in there about when we would review this again?
So maybe under section 2, the ordinance should be effective November 7th, 2018, and evaluated on November 7th, 2019.
Yeah, like that.
Need another motion.
Friendly amendment?
Yes, I'm amending my motion to include that, added as well.
I'll support that.
The evaluation, at the last page, this ordinance shall become effective November 7th, 2018, and evaluated November of 2019.
It's a good idea, so it doesn't fall off our radar.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other questions, comments, Commissioner?
Just real quick, Mayor, just want to reiterate something that was said earlier this morning about this very issue, and that is just the first of all, kudos to all who came to the table, the folks from RPOA and the folks from Homes for All and city staff, and really engaging in civil discourse, trying to find some common ground, which I'm sure all who came to the table perhaps didn't think that was at all possible. But I think that what we have before us is perhaps can be framed as a work in progress. Again, I love the idea of looking at it a year from now to see, if it's performing the way in which we intended it to, and if not, that's the beauty, I think, of the body here, is that we have the ability and the capacity to change, to tweak, so that it can be something that, at the end of the day, a point that was made by Commissioner Lanier, that we can have something that's more equitable. And I think what makes this all the more complex and increases the level of tension is, I think, the practice of, again, making the mistake of putting all landlords in one bucket, and perhaps making the assumption that all, if not most of landlords are slumlords. And I think the same can be said about perhaps how landlords perhaps look at their tenants, and the fact that maybe there's also the negative mental model that's applied to people who are low income. And so I think this is a great opportunity to just kind of back away from all that rhetoric and perhaps begin to treat each other with a greater sense of dignity and respect. Because obviously the landlord is in the business of making money and collecting rent for that property, but also to provide housing. And the tenant is in the business of trying to find a roof over their head. So it's obviously something that can be mutually beneficial. And the hope is that we can create, again, an ordinance, or at least
create an atmosphere that is more conducive to having great appreciation, or both parties having great appreciation for one another.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner?
I'll just make one other point. I know when we discussed this earlier, we talked about the next 120 days having a robust educational initiative so that we're trying to educate as many rental property owners as possible so that they can be in compliance. And I think I'm glad that whoever came up with the idea of making this effective in 120 days, I think that was a really good suggestion because it gives us a little bit of time to try and reach out to as many property owners as possible.
Okay. Any final questions, comments, thoughts? All right. This is a roll call vote tonight.
I just want to clarify that Eric, you'll send those two things. Oh, here it comes.
Look at Eric.
There you go.
Tuesday night.
It's different than the different side. Perfect. We'll get this all taken care of. All right. Commissioner Jones.
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor.
No.
Commissioner Kelly.
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes.
Motion carried. Next ordinance is Municipal Civil Infraction Ordinance Amendment in conjunction with a residential rental application ordinance.
So moved.
Support.
All right, Commissioner Jones, you want to tell us about this?
Yeah, Mayor, on June 5th, a resolution was approved introducing an ordinance to amend Chapter 170 Municipal Civil Infractions to coincide with the residential rental application ordinance under consideration by adding Section 9.857.174, thereby making a violation of the residential rental application ordinance a municipal civil infraction. Since that time, the proposed fees have been increased to amended to $100 for the first offense, $200 for the second offense, and $1,000 for each subsequent offense based on work with stakeholders.
All right. Commissioners, questions, comments? Okay, this is a roll call vote.
Commissioner Kelly.
Yes.
Commissioner Jones.
Yes.
Commissioner Lemire.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor.
No.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes. It carries.
Motion carries. Ordinance number 3, ordinance approving a major amendment to a planned redevelopment district at 3019 Coit Avenue Northeast to facilitate the use of the property as a religious institution.
So moved.
Support.
All right, Commissioner Kelly, you want to tell us about this?
Yes, this is the property at 3019 Coit that Sunshine Church wants to use as their house of worship. We heard a lot of testimony about that already tonight, which was fortunate that we've had the opportunity early on. I can tell you a little bit about some of the feedback that we've had. I understand that they've also had, already some events with veterans, like a barbecue, and there are veterans who are excited about the fact that they're going to have a number of activities there, which would include affordable childcare, tutoring, mentoring, youth activities, recreation, community service, and so on. So they're looking forward to having some interaction with them. I certainly heard the concerns about whether or not the veterans wanted to use that facility, but we recognize that unfortunately they don't, and I don't want this to be confused at all with the other facility that was talked about by Guiding Light. This is a totally different issue. So I think that we've answered those questions about the sale of that property, and the VA has clarified that they do not want it. So there we have it.
All right. Commissioner?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I was wondering if Suzanne Schultz could come up. I have a question. There's been some questions out there regarding the, I guess, the use of the facility and the deed restrictions of some kind. Just wanted to get some clarifications on that.
Good evening, Commissioners and Mayor. The issue is really, it should have been, if there was such a restriction, it should have been placed in the deed. And instead, it's in zoning. So this is very awkward for you as a legislative body to be faced with this. What they did in 1990 when they approved the planned unit development, they placed in the zoning that it should be used for veterans facilities or related uses on the medical office. So, you have this condition. As was stated by the church, the VA had first right of refusal in the sale of that property, and they have declined that first right of refusal. In talking with the VA, they would need to have the legislature actually provide resources to be able to purchase that, and those haven't been requested or granted. So there's not money to be able to buy the property by the VA, and so they declined that purchase, and they certainly had it available to them and did not take on that opportunity, and as a result, then it went on to the open market, and that's where Sunshine Church has decided to purchase the property. So you have an issue where you kind of have this issue between private parties that's really not up for the city commission to determine. They had, a legal agreement in the deed. That's up to them on how they want to enforce that. That's not up to you as the commission. Your purview is the zoning pieces, and under the zoning, the request to amend a PUD is allowed. And they've requested to change what the use is in the PUD, and in this case it's for a religious institution rather than a veterans facility. So that's really the request before you, and that was what we had the hearing on just a couple of weeks ago, and the Planning Commission voted in favor of allowing for the church to be located there.
Can you remind us, is the plan to demolish the existing facility and rebuild, or is it to renovate the existing facility?
They're planning on renovating the existing facility.
All right. Other questions? Okay, this is a roll call vote.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes.
The motion carries. Next ordinance is an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance relative to adult daycare, adult foster care, and text associated with the implementation of the Granville Avenue Area Specific Plan.
So moved.
Support.
All right, Commissioner, you want to tell us about this?
Yeah, these are 3 text amendments under consideration. 2 amendments are intended to allow adult daycare and adult foster care with special land use approval in the low-density residential zone districts. The third is intended to correct an unintentional omission of text associated with the implementation of the Granville Avenue Area Specific Plan that we recently adopted.
All right, Commissioners, questions, comments? This is lengthy, but it's a lot of just text updates and amendments as the ordinance indicates. But if you pull it up, it looks lengthier than it is. All right, roll call vote for that.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes.
The motion carries. Ordinance is approved. Next ordinance is to repeal and replace in its entirety Chapter 42 of Title 3 of the Code of the City of Grand Rapids entitled Trees.
So move.
Support?
All right, Commissioner Lanier, you want to tell us about this?
Yes, so in Chapter 42, there are a number of changes to the ordinance, and so they just did a repeal and replace. On June 12th is when we had the proposed ordinance before us, and some of the articles that were replaced, or that were edits, I should say, the addition of Article 8, which was the landmark article, landmark trees, and that's defining and outlining the historic trees within our city. The second change was the change in the makeup of the Urban Forestry Committee. They went from a 9-member body to 11. The establishment of a tree bank, and then lastly, this simplify and clarify the permit process requirements for city staff, contractors, and utility companies. So this is just making that official.
All right. Commissioners, any questions, comments? Commissioner Kelly, you serve on our Urban Forest Committee.
Yes, and I think you recall, Mayor, that this is years in the process. And
sure
so it's
is.
really quite exciting to have this finally come to us for a vote. There was a whole lot of community input on this and a lot of time spent. And I want to thank our city attorney's office too for the help that you gave us in defining so much of this and the wording in this ordinance. So excited.
Yeah, thank you. All right, any other questions, comments? All right, this is a roll call vote.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss. The ordinance is adopted.
I said, I didn't say yes.
Sorry.
Yes. Were you reading my mind?
That's right. Keep up, would you?
I know, sorry.
He does read minds. He's reading my head.
Next ordinance. Ordinance to add Chapter 182 entitled Electric Patrol Vehicles to Title 10 of the Code of the City of Grand Rapids.
So moved.
Support.
All right, Commissioner Jones, you want to tell us about this?
Yes, ma'am. Electric patrol vehicles are lightweight, electrically powered vehicles that come in a variety of styles designed to provide first responders and parking enforcement personnel mobility and access that conventional automobiles cannot provide. Currently, the Grand Rapids Police Department operates three-wheeled Segway models. GRPD has found that electric patrol vehicles help increase the visibility of police officers in the community and allow officers to interact with the public in a unique way. Additionally, embracing the use of alternative modes of transportation is consistent with the city's goal for sustainable operations and 21st century mobility solutions.
Thank you. That kind of sounded like a commercial.
It did.
An advertisement. All right, Commissioners, this is another one that we have talked about for a long time that we actually had to get state legislation enacted for. So any questions or comments? All right, this is a roll call vote tonight.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones.
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes. And then can I get a motion to give this immediate effect?
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It carries. All right, thank you. All right, next that will take us to our public hearings tonight. So we have one public hearing tonight. So we'll start off, if you're here to speak on this public hearing, we'll start it off with giving our planning director an opportunity to tee it up and provide some background. And then I will open it up for public comment. All right, welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you. On June 12, 2018, the City Commission established July 10th, 2018, today, as the date to hold a public hearing for the amendments. Just a little history briefly on marijuana in the city. In 2008, Michigan adopted the Medical Marijuana Act, and at that time, we amended the zoning ordinance to allow for medical marijuana caregivers as a home occupation. So we have had that in place for quite some time. And then on September 21st, 2016, Governor Sider signed a package of bills that expands the types of medical marijuana facilities permitted under state law and established a licensing program. So the Michigan Medical Marijuana Licensing Facilities Licensing Act allows for growers, processors, provisioning centers, secure transporters, and safety compliance facilities. We have been, as far as the history goes, this has been a rapidly changing field. Under that 2016 Act, LARA, the licensing agency, had until December 15th, 2017 to develop their rules. And in December, they did release their rules. And given our experience in the past with the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, the MLCC has their own set of rules for managing alcohol. And we knew that there might be some crossover between LARA's rules and the boundaries that LARA would set as compared to local regulations. So we wanted to wait till LARA released those rules to consider doing anything. This spring, however, there was recreational ballot language discussed, and so there was some hesitancy to advance. So I will talk a little bit about the recreational piece in here, just so that you have a little bit more background, and as it pertains to a lot of the public meetings that we've had recently about this topic. So knowing recreational is going to be on the ballot now in November, this is a little bit of an awkward stage that we're in with both a petition that's been proposed. It was proposed to the city, announced to the city in April that a petition would be on the ballot within the city of Grand Rapids to allow for an unlimited number of marijuana facilities. And so we wanted to provide a response to that out of concern by looking at communities within Michigan that have allowed for an unlimited number of facilities and unexpected or unanticipated consequences of that action. And so trying to look at it from a more pragmatic standpoint and be considerate of both the quality of life within our community and how do we manage changing land uses, how do we manage a concentration of uses no matter what they are, everything from drive-throughs to other types of uses, how do we manage a concentration of uses so that it doesn't overrun on one particular area of our city or our neighborhoods or business districts. So based on the experience of other places, however, such as Lansing, they have Michigan Avenue, which is almost entirely medical marijuana businesses. And the concern was, what would that do within Grand Rapids? And so we started looking at that and looking at the Recreational Act as well and what could happen. A little bit of background, when we talk about what is currently licensed within Kent County, Cannon Township is the only community in Kent County that has allowed for one grower and one processor. They do not allow for any provisioning centers. In our surrounding 7 counties, just 5 communities have opted in. Actually, that just recently changed to 6, but of 5 communities, only 4 provisioning centers are allowed. And in the city of Muskegon, they just recently adopted ordinance language on June 15th to allow an unlimited number. In Kent County, we have 10,600 medical marijuana patients. In the region, we have 30,000. And so we took that into consideration in looking at this, but then also through our discussions in the community, we also wanted to look at what other communities have done. We looked at Tucson, we looked at Los Angeles and Ann Arbor, and we did community outreach. So we have a website on the city's website. If you go there and you can just Google medical marijuana into the city's website box, it'll take you to that source. There we have the ordinance language as well as a cannabis compendium that we created that has data, and it's a continually evolving document. We're adding more information as we get it into that document. We also have a story map, which I'll talk about it a little bit. And then we've also held 4 community meetings for information throughout the city at different times of day so that people could learn information about it. The most recent one was last night at West Grand, and we had about 50 people in attendance. A couple caveats, and I'm adding this with a couple caveats right at the beginning of this presentation just because I think it's helped inform the discussion as we've gone out and discussed this with the community. One thing to know is that the zoning ordinance is constantly evolving as state law, federal law, case law changes, community acceptance changes, how we normalize new things. So an example would be microbreweries. Breweries used to be considered an industrial use. And that was typically people's frame of reference was brewing as industrial, or distilleries were an industrial use because you're processing and there's flame and potentially flammable or things that could explode. So as the industry has changed, so has how we look at that, and we've changed our ordinances accordingly. So we now look like in microbreweries up to a certain level as more of a restaurant use. And as we have experience with those uses and the community understands them more, we're able to transition into something different. But then you also have the case of like a Founders, which is a very different scale of intensity. And so we want to be sensitive about that. There's also nuances, I mentioned that briefly, between the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act and the recreational marijuana language that's proposed in November. And a couple of those items I just wanted to briefly point out because this came up a lot during our community meetings. For example, I already listed the 5 uses that are allowed under the Licensing Act. The Recreational Act would allow another use for micro businesses with the intention behind it to be similar to like a local microbrewery or micro distillery. The current law that we are under does not allow for that, but the Recreational Act does, and it also has a rule that allows for any other type of marijuana regulated businesses that LARA wants to make rules for. So there's an opportunity, I think, for a different scale of marijuana businesses than what we currently have underneath the current law. There was also discussion about whether or not you could allow co-location of facilities and how we look at this. And in particular, the discussion has been, could you only keep a scope about marijuana, medical marijuana, and not recreational marijuana? And in the Recreational Marijuana Act, it specifically says you have to allow both. Like if you allow medical, you're allowing recreational. And so that's, and I think, an important thing. They also include establishment of 1,000 feet from pre-K to 12 schools, so they have a separation distance similar to our code. And there's also differences in fees, that the fee structure that's provided. So there's been a lot of discussion about the fees that are included in the ordinance that I'm going to discuss tonight. But I did want you to be aware that under the current structure of the Medical Marijuana Facilities Act, that would change under the recreational, and actually would change the structure of what the revenues would be. So I won't go into all those details, but I just did want to make you aware that there are different impacts depending on those two pieces. This is the cover of the website that provides access to the information that I'm going to discuss briefly tonight. So if people want more information, they can go to that. What we did in looking at buffer areas, and on your page that is in front of you, and we provided handouts for all the audience members, you'll see two different versions, both the Planning Department and the Planning Commission version, highlighted where there's changes that differ. And they're really kind of the highlights, I think, also of the ordinance that's being provided. What we did is we looked at, as I mentioned, ordinances from throughout the country and how they manage buffers and what they look at for different types of uses, and ones that we thought had different management styles. It was typical to find an exclusion to residential zone districts, and in fact, the proposed language for recreational actually prohibits marijuana businesses from being in recreational or residential zone districts. So we excluded residential zone districts, and typical in our zoning ordinance for any type of commercial activity is limited to commercial industrial areas. So we automatically excluded all the residential areas from consideration. We also looked at potentially sensitive uses. So 1,000 feet from a child care center, public or private K through 12 school, 1,000 feet from a publicly owned park or playground, 1,000 feet from a church or place of worship, also from a substance abuse clinic or rehab facility. And then we also are suggesting 1,000 feet from the boundaries of adjoining local jurisdictions. You did receive a letter of concern from the surrounding mayors who have expressed an interest to not have marijuana facilities in their communities. We also included a 250-foot buffer from residential zone districts to provide a little extra padding for protection for those areas. And then to limit the concentration, which the Planning Commission also discussed concentration of uses, the suggestion is 600 feet from another facility. When we look at the Planning Department's recommendation, what you have then, once you have those areas of sensitive uses that have the buffers around them and the other applicable pieces, there are 208 potential parcels that could satisfy that criteria. And then if you apply the spacing requirement, that 600-foot spacing requirement, you end up with the optimum would be 41 marijuana facility locations. In the zoning ordinance, the Planning Department version, and as well as both of them, what we do allow is that we allow stacking of grower licenses. So when I talk about facility locations, you could also have multiple licenses at that spot. So you could have multiple grower licenses located there. We also allow for stacking. And what that means, co-location. And what we mean by when we say co-location, that you could have a growing facility and also a provisioning center with it. And that's very similar. What we already do in our industrial transportation zone district is we allow for industrial uses to have what we view as ancillary functions. For example, if we talk about Ferris Nut and Coffee, having a coffee shop, or Notions Marketing, having a retail outlet. We're reviewing that the same way, and we allow a 25% of the gross floor area to be used for those ancillary uses. So that is what the department recommendation would be. The Planning Commission suggested for provisioning centers eliminating the following buffers. Those for churches and places of worship, substance abuse clinics and rehab facilities, the boundaries of local jurisdictions, and from residential zone districts. And they also suggested increasing the the spacing between provisioning centers from 600 feet to 1,000 feet. If with that arrangement, that would allow, based on, again, kind of that criteria and looking at all the numbers, potential locations for 143 provisioning centers, and then 293 additional locations for secure transporter, safety compliance facilities, growers, and processors. Again, keeping in mind those 293 sites could also have provisioning centers in addition to them. So that would allow for up to a potential 436 provisioning centers and almost 300 of other marijuana facility locations within the city. The application requirements contained within the ordinance is a good neighbor plan and a voluntary equitable development agreement component. The Planning Commission suggested removing the voluntary equitable development agreement. What that is intended to do is to provide neighborhoods and the marijuana businesses to work cooperatively together to improve the area, similar to a community benefits agreement. And the Planning Commission expressed concern that it may be more restrictive on this business than other businesses within the city of Grand Rapids. The VITA, though, however, is a new thing that you just recently adopted, so it's hard to say from a testing standpoint. The last thing that I'll mention is the fees that the Planning Commission has suggested eliminating. We have in the ordinance a proposed $5,000 fee that would help defray administrative and enforcement costs. The Planning Commission suggested eliminating that so that it would favor more businesses. I think one thing to note is the costs of, I'm sorry, I should have shown this to everybody sooner. One thing to note is the costs of doing this business and what's involved. And I think that's one of the challenges when we're looking through this lens of marijuana businesses and especially introducing them in Michigan underneath the current act. Just to do an application fee for LARA for a pre-qualification is $6,000 with an annual fee paid to LARA of $48,000 for each license. The only exception to that is a grower Class A license, which is $10,000. And then a business also has to have capitalization of certain amounts. For example, a provisioning center has to have demonstrate capitalization to LARA of $300,000. And they have a definition of what that takes for the capitalization. So this takes a lot of resources. And I think LARA's fees are also demonstrative of, because this is a whole new industry and we're setting up an entirely new framework, that it does take resources to be able to manage that and to understand it, which is the justification for keeping the fees in from the department's perspective. So the maps that I have in front of you, the one map right here, the purple one, is the Planning Department recommendation, if it will change. The second one in dark blue is the Planning Commission recommendations, and we did do on our website a side-by-side so that people could see the difference there. So it's kind of a fun website, so you can go and check it out. Are there any questions for me?
All right, thank you. Commissioners, questions for Suzanne before we open up for public comment?
Yeah, Suzanne, I'm looking at this letter that we got from the neighboring jurisdictions who wanted the 1,000-foot buffer. But I'm wondering, once the recreational, we're assuming it's going to pass, the numbers are looking like that. Once that passed, how is that going to affect our sister cities? Aren't they going to have to begin to allow for these sites? Right now, they're opting out. But.
Correct. Right now, the current act requires you to opt in. Mm-hmm. The recreational act requires you to opt out.
Okay.
So they will have to take action to opt out if they're going to do so.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions for Suzanne? All right. Okay. Thank you, Suzanne. That's a really good overview. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to open up this public comment period. I'll remind you of a few rules. One, we ask that you say your name, the city that you live in, your address, or the city that you live in, or both. And then also there's a clipboard up there. We ask you to write down your name so that our clerk can get it accurate in the record. Again, the same rules apply, so you'll be given up to 3 minutes to speak. And I'm also going to remind everyone, again, we want to make sure that this is a place where everyone is heard. We really respect this space and everyone else, and some people may have different opinions. So we ask that even if you really strongly agree with somebody who's speaking, that you hold on to and your applause or clapping or hooting or yelling. We want to make sure that this is a safe space for everyone, regardless of whether you agree with them or not, that this is a time for them to be heard. So appreciate that. All right, so we'll open this up for public comment.
Evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Michael Tuffmeyer, 611 Bates Southeast, 3rd Ward. I'm not really going to sit here and talk about benefits or anything like that, or talk about, what it does for, I'm a combat veteran myself, or what it does for combat veterans. What I want to speak on is this. This is the simple truth. First, our little group is made up of a lot of city leaders and elected officials. They have a lot of money, and they're willing to give it. I don't want to be part of this. I've been dealing with this for almost a decade. Full disclosure, I'm the treasurer of Smart and Safe GR, and I'm also a board member of the board of directors of Michigan Legalize, which is a part of the coalition to regulate marijuana like alcohol, which got the ballot on the Michigan, which is on the Michigan ballot right now. We can just end this today if you just adopt the Planning Commission's recommendations. Those are great recommendations. It would make us look like a leader in this state. It would make us stand out, and it would also open up the market to a lot of people, including, as best as it possibly could, for lack of anything else, open a market that would allow for equity. I mean, right now, if you make this, with a few 40 spaces or even very limited, it's already very hard if you're a person of color or a person of lower income to ever get your hands on this marijuana market. If you make it very restrictive, it's going to become even more restrictive. It will almost become impossible. It's only going to take a couple years for people to get into this market, for them to build themselves up. And at that point in time, a lot of people will be left in the dust. So, these listening tours, it's really done nothing but get me more money. You guys had your first listening tour, and I walked out of a meeting with $12,000 in our account for the campaign. They're not going to go with the restrictive. You cannot keep this caged in. They're willing to spend as much money as possible, put this on the ballot, which we have a storefront now because of the listening tours, and we will make the July 31st deadline. At least that's what I'm being told, compared to the staff that we've hired and the signature gathering company we've hired. We don't want unlimited, this idea of a green mile, that's absurd. That wouldn't economically ever happen. We didn't put caps because you don't zone by petition. You allow the city and the zoning departments to do what they do, a good job in planning. All we do is want to opt in. But I want to end it. They're either going to go to a ballot, and if they don't get that, they even talk about litigation, and they have the money to do it and the resources to do it, whether they're willing to win or not. And that just costs us a lot of money and time. So please, I just ask that you take the Planning Commission's recommendations, make this a less restrictive market, and make us look like a leader in the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, others wish to be heard?
Hello, Dottie Rhodes. I live in the 2nd Ward, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time for this incredibly important discussion that we're all having. As a transplant to the great state of Michigan and Grand Rapids, it was really was apparent to me really quickly when I moved here. There's a very strong entrepreneurial theme that runs through Grand Rapids. So that's why I was so disappointed when I heard and I saw the, I believe, really restrictive language that deviates from the Planning Commission's language. I believe that by restricting this and not allowing entrepreneurs to step forward and to see what we can do, it's going to really put an undue burden on communities of color, people with lower income, women who want to start in this industry. And I believe that that is a huge deterrent, and it really, as Michael was saying, it really does not help us become a leader that we need to be in Michigan. So, and as someone who I co-own a communications firm that is strictly for cannabis business, okay? So my partner and I, we decided to do this because we have, number one, great faith in the state of Michigan and our own abilities, of course, and then also in the incredible benefits of medical marijuana and all of the incredible opportunities that it affords people. So what I'm asking you is to please reconsider the Planning Commission's language and the proposal that they put forward. This is a commission that, did due diligence, listened to folks, and put forth a really reasonable plan. So I'm asking you to please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dottie. All right. Commissioner, so good to see you. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Elected officials, appointed staff, I just want to, first of all, thank you for your service because, believe me, I know it's a tough job. Very rewarding job, but a tough job. And I promised I'd never ever show up after I was done after 16 years. I had to come tonight and talk about.
And I should say, this is Roy Schmidt from the First Ward.
I forgot that. You got me
I know,
off
that's
kilter.
okay.
I'm
We
Roy
all know
Schmidt,
who you are.
and
It's good
I'm
to see
a
you.
proud First Ward resident.
Yeah.
I did hear, before I comment, several times, fix, tweet, change. And in my 16 years, we had issues that we approved and we had to fix and we had to change. And I think, this is one that we could fix and tweak and change. I looked, and if you read, I'm sure you read the proposed zoning, this article by Nick Names, proposed zoning offers scant potential for medical marijuana industry in Grand Rapids. Nobody's disputed this as far as I'm concerned, and when Suzanne talks about 41 properties, it's obviously less than that. I'm here as an advocate for the Planning Commission because you have the ability to fix, tweet, and people need this medicine. I've as you know, Commissioner Kelly mentioned it will probably pass. Now 80% of Michiganders support legalized marijuana, and so I'm sure it's going to pass. And as you know, the state yesterday added 10 more diseases to the list. One of them for post-traumatic stress disorder, amongst others. And I can't stress to you enough that, when you compare alcohol, and which I have no problem at all with, but to medical marijuana and to recreational marijuana, you're talking about something that really makes a difference with people. And and the other thing is, for gosh sake, there's been enough lives that have been ruined, especially young lives that have these records of a marijuana conviction or other convictions, and it needs to go away, and it needs to go away quick, because it's just simply not fair. So please consider the Planning Commission, because you can make a change or adjust if we need to. But let's be the city that I always see, and I'm very proud of your work, that's progressive, that says, you know what, we're not going to go stick in the corner. We're going to come out swinging and do it right, though. You're going to do it right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Roy. All right, others wish to be heard? Hi, welcome.
Hello, my name is Amanda Leanne Brunzell. I'm a U.S. Naval veteran, and I'm a resident in the Midtown neighborhood. I'm also a medical marijuana patient, and for me, I've been diagnosed with chronic pain, severe nausea, PTSD, anxiety, and depression. What you can't see is I have a boot on my right foot, and I actually had surgery last week, Monday, on my reproductive organs. I knew I was going to be having surgery, and my plan was to go to Lansing to a dispensary to prepare for pain management after surgery. But I got sick, and I've been on narcotics since I've been in surgery because I didn't have access to my medication beforehand. So you can imagine what a hard week it's been for me, between being in severe pain and then having to cope with my PTSD that was triggered up because of the fireworks. Veterans need this. because of my ailments, before I was a medical marijuana patient, I took approximately 15 to 20 pills a day, and I take about half of that now as I am a patient. I've also been able to stay off of narcotics, therefore avoiding possible addiction. And studies have actually shown that there's been a 14.4% reduction in prescription opioid use where marijuana is accessible. I know I've had a rough week, and I know I'm just one of the 38,000 veterans here in Kent County. You guys have the ability to directly help veterans in this community. Polling went on, and 95% of veterans with PTSD believe in the legalization of medical marijuana because we have found out it has worked for us. There's even been a provision in the federal budget that will allow VA doctors to recommend medical marijuana to veterans. So on the federal level, work is already being done to get it to us. Today you have the ability to bring new business to our city that will provide high-paying jobs and major taxes into our community. Because of this, I implore that you vote in favor of allowing dispensaries in our city, not just for me, but for others.
Thank you, Amanda. Thanks for coming. Hi, welcome.
Good evening. I'm Kathleen Graham. I'm from Broman, Michigan.
I'm sorry, from where, ma'am?
Pardon me?
What did you say your city?
Broman.
Oh, Broman, okay.
I'm here tonight to discuss the proposed zoning ordinance for the medical marijuana cannabis industry. And I am Kathleen Graham. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care registered nurse. I'm a regional operations manager. I oversee the nurses that care for your dying residents. Your staff and other witnesses have briefed you on the potential impact of zoning ordinances, the impact on revenue, crime, the impact on traffic, even odor. I'm here to brief you on the potential impact of the zoning plan on patients. That's what's most important. It's medical marijuana cannabis, after all. There are many different varieties of medical cannabis. The best labs document over 40 plus unique active ingredients in medical cannabis, and plants have various combinations of these components, and thus when consumed affect people differently. Similarly, we have many varieties of antidepressants when consumed affect people differently. Experience in other states show that when there are more licensed growers, there are more varieties consistently available. When there are just a few large corporations, they tend to grow huge quantities of a few popular brands, usually high THC. This leaves out the varieties of medical cannabis that can help patients with conditions like Parkinson's disease, dementia, autism, epilepsy, and seizure disorders. Can you imagine giving one of the 5,000 plus hospice patients in Kent County, especially a dementia patient, a variety of medical cannabis that is only high THC? 1-to-1 ratios of THC and CBD, cannabidiol, help to minimize the euphoric effects of THC. With 75% of our pediatric hospice patients using medical cannabis to help manage their end-of-life symptoms, you can see how this affects hospice care. In the same way, different patients need a variety of differently processed products available, particularly products that they don't have to smoke. Medical cannabis patients need medicine in the forms like tea, liquids, gels, lotions, sprays, drops under the tongue, capsules, vaporizers, and suppositories. Limiting the number of licenses limits the variety of medical cannabis and the variety of products available to the patients. This commission should be encouraging small cottage growers that specialize in this niche market, not large agribusinesses that specialize in high THC. We need a large number of licenses to make sure these forms of medicine, this specific niche, can be available to the 4,000 plus medical cannabis patients in Grand Rapids and the more than 11,000 plus medical cannabis patients in Kent County. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Thanks. Oh, and ma'am, can you make sure that you sign the clipboard there?
I did already.
Oh, you did. Thank you. Okay, oh, you signed early. Okay, well then I won't, if I don't see you, I won't remind you, so. Hi, welcome.
Hi, hello, my name is Jay Fleming. I am a cannabis consultant and prospective retailer from Kalamazoo. Studies like a recent one by the University of Pueblo consistently find that cannabis businesses provide strong economic benefits to communities who accept them. They found that for every dollar spent at a cannabis retailer, another $2.34 enter the local economy. For your average general retailer, that figure is 88 cents. When I look at the stringent recommendations of the planning department, I see a repeat of what happened in Kalamazoo. A small enough parcel pool that big money will have an easy time buying the available properties, pricing small local businesses out of the market. The economic benefits cannabis retailers provide is largely due to their shoppers paying for other goods and services in the surrounding area. By limiting locations, you limit the businesses that can benefit from that customer stream. What about parking and infrastructure? Due to the limited number of communities licensing marijuana retailers, I estimate that Grand Rapids is likely to serve 28,340 patients by the end of 2018, or 3,760 customers a day. Using your zoning ordinance as a benchmark for the expected number of parking spaces and the parcels provided, things look only minimally adequate given a best case 41 licenses granted scenario, which is not realistic. The planning department has communicated their intent for this ordinance to serve as the basis for any future recreational licensing the city undertakes. If the city does go recreational, that 3,760 daily customers jumps up to about 15,130. And the parking and traffic situations in the areas surrounding license holders will be hit hard. There will be long lines of cash-carrying customers waiting in parking lots and sidewalks. And what does that do to patient access? How do we expect vulnerable medical patients to compete with the flood of recreational users? And how do we ensure that they have safe access to their medication? To those that would suggest they go somewhere else, where? The situation is the same in all of Michigan's major cities. The Planning Commission's zoning suggestions do a better job of anticipating and addressing the demands on infrastructure and the need for safe patient access. It gives smaller local businesses a fighting chance to get their foot in the door. It does a better job of spreading out the demand on infrastructure and ensuring that patients have safe access. Where I disagree with the Planning Commission is on the VITA requirements and the $5,000 application fee. I feel that the cannabis industry is uniquely placed to serve as an example in sharing with the community by making VITAs a standard. I also feel strongly that the city should charge the full $5,000 application fee and use the excess of that fee to fund a staff person to help facilitate and maintain good neighbor plans and VITAs. This person's job would be to liaise between the city, neighborhood associations, and license holders, ensuring that residents and officials have a clear line of communication and action regarding questions, complaints, and compliance concerns. Responsibilities could include updating city officials regarding changes to the state of federal law and industry practices that could impact the local landscape. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Hi, welcome.
Good evening, commissioners and public. My name is Eric Foster. I'm with Cannabis Practice Group. I live in Okemos, Michigan, and we're headquartered in Southfield, Michigan. A few things that I wanted to start with. One, the recreational bill, if passed, does not change the Medical Act. MMFLA PA 281 to 283 of 2016, nor the Medical Marijuana Act of 2008 are changed by that passage. A lot of people make confusion based on section 4.1 of the bill language, subsection 2, which codifies that the existing laws cannot be limited in regards to medical or patient access through the original act. 2, communities do not have to opt in for for recreational. That is not a requirement of the proposed language that would be passed. You have the ability to make that decision. Laura or the state has 12 months from adoption to set up emergency rules and start accepting applications, but then communities have to opt in. Ergo, it's going to be regulated similarly to the MMFLA, but in a different lane, a complete different lane, as it is in Colorado, as it is in California and other states. 1. 2, with respect to the ordinance that you're looking at, the Planning Commission changes do allow for a few things. 1, they allow for the ability for businesses to come into the industry, come into the community in a more cost-effective vantage point. Right now, the average facility on the provisioning center side has to invest anywhere from 1.5 to 3 million to meet compliancy requirements, as well as staffing and other structures within the regulatory process, up to commercial grow operations built from the ground up, anywhere from 6 to 10 million. If you limit to 41 locations, you're going to drive the cost of land acquisition up easily by 150 to 300%, which makes the cost prohibitive for businesses to come here. Now, another thing is the fact that in this market, Muskegon, we worked with Muskegon to help the city of Muskegon to opt in. In the area that they have, the zoning district, so far 16 properties have been sold to medical cannabis applicants. The properties have all sold for a total of $4.3 million. They were worth combined $1.1 million. So the city's seeing over a 300% increase. This will bring additional revenue and value back to the city if you adopt this with a more structured ordinance to give the businesses opportunity to compete. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Foster. All right, others who wish to be heard?
Hello, my name is Matt Hoffman. I'm a Grand Rapids resident, and my credentials are I'm the committee chair for the Cannabis Cultivators Committee of the National Cannabis Industry Association. I'm also a local business owner, and it's my job to connect the people who want to work in the cannabis industry with the people that will be pursuing applications with you. I think the biggest issue that I have is if we look at the infographic that was provided earlier with the map and it had the thing go across it, and we see just how many spaces are actually available for this land use, and then we see the thing go across it and we see how many aren't available. My concern just from a production standpoint is that as a cultivator who's invested millions of dollars in infrastructure and payrolls, I may not want to cohabitate with someone who may not meet or exceed my standards because there are communicable pests and diseases. It could jeopardize my whole facility and the jobs. Usually each facility at about a 1,500 plant grow facility class C can employ about 100 people. So it could jeopardize 100 jobs. And I'm happy to provide the employment statistics if this commission is interested in that. I have all that aggregated. I just want to echo what my colleagues and peers have said in that I agree that we should follow the Planning Commission. I participated in the process there, and I thought that it was very engaging, that we had great community dialogue, and that for the most part, the majority of the opinion was positive for cannabis. And I think that the Planning Commission did a good job listening to the recommendations, and I would like to see as many of these facilities as possible in the city because it's job creation. And it's job creation in an industry that we could really be leaders in. And I've traveled all over the world, and I choose to live in Grand Rapids because I see the opportunity and because I love the beer culture. And I think that that's a fantastic opportunity that we could cultivate here in the cannabis industry. So let's continue to be leaders. Not only in alcohol, but in progressive cannabis businesses as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. All right, others who wish to be heard?
My name is Cindy. I originally came here to speak about this topic. I live in the 3rd Ward. Like I stated earlier, 2 months ago, I just had a major surgery where I was cut 360 degrees all the way around my body. Due to new state regulations, I can't say I've never felt more pain after a surgery. Headed home, I had about 80 pills prescribed to me for only 2 months worth of recovery that were opioid based. I basically rely on medical marijuana, otherwise I simply can't move or turn around or lay in bed. Due to some parts of the housing crisis and people not being able to have enough space, there were people that were angry that I didn't allow them to pitch tents in my backyard. So I was a victim, I would say, of CPS knocking on my door where someone had reported that I used medical marijuana in my home. And I just would like to say that I started using medical marijuana after I witnessed my husband be assaulted on our front steps by police, and having my daughter live in a third world country away from me for 1.5 years. I have been diagnosed with PTSD. I'm on a lot of medication for antidepressants now. My life has extremely changed to the point that I feel that I need medicine, and that avenue. I also feel that a lot of people are left out of reach. They don't have transportation. I feel the Planning Commission is a little, I would say not a little, but a lot, very strict with their recommendations. We have liquor stores open across from churches. Sorry guys, I know you won't like that, but I don't feel there should be any reason to keep facilities more than 600 feet away. There's a great deal of good things that happen when businesses compete, and I feel there should be an unlimited amount due to people that are handicapped and veterans can't always get mobile to facilities, and they need to be close within walking distance. I feel that a lot of discretion should be used, and I don't really believe in black and white policies because I don't feel that really serves human beings that need the help. So my recommendation is to open that a little more. I also did third shift work helping people that were in hospice care. I would prefer to offer a cannabis option instead of just shoving morphine down someone's throat to watch them die. So I just needed to share my experience, and hoping that this will pass in November.
Yeah.
And appreciate your time for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. All right, others who wish to be heard? Hi, welcome.
Hello, my name is John Campbell. I'm a citizen of Walker. I also am the co-owner of a medical marijuana company based out of Berrien County. I just wanted to speak in support of the Planning Commission's recommendation and make some points about the Planning Department's recommendation. You know, some of it seems like a solution in search of a problem. These buffer zones around every single one of the zoning, different zoning areas and different sensitive locations. You know, we already have a system for what uses should go in what places. It's called zoning. You know, and we've determined that uses like a medical marijuana retail facility should go in a commercial location or an industrial location. And, you know, because it's new and different, apparently there's a feeling that it needs to be regulated to the hilt. But I'm not sure there's any data to support, one, that there's a problem that is fixed by these buffers, or that there's a problem at all. The over-reliance on the buffers is also arbitrary. I mean, it's an objective measure, but the results are arbitrary. You've got large pieces of industrial property that are vacant, perfect for development. You got people who want to develop them, and because a tiny little corner of that parcel touches a buffer from a church 1,000 feet away, it may even be separated by a natural barrier like the river or the expressway. It could take you 15 minutes to drive over there, but it knocks out this perfectly usable piece of property. Not only is it under-inclusive, it's also over-inclusive. There's a piece right on Division that meets the Planning Department's requirements. It's smack dab in the middle of the parking lot for the Boys and Girls Club. I mean, there's no argument that that's a good location for it. But when it comes to those special land use applications and the standards are, well, does it fit in the required area? The city's going to have a hard time saying it doesn't fit in this required area when it fits every one of these very restrictive buffers. Those 40 properties, it's more like 12. I mean, unless you guys are going to sell me the Public Works building, or the county's going to sell me the road commission, or the, you know, some of the other county-owned and city-owned properties that are included in there. It overvalues these properties where there's already a going business on it when there's a vacant building right next door that we could be rehabbing and putting something in. The MLCC measurements, they don't use these buffers that result in, you know, you have a 10-minute drive to this place that's 1,000 feet away. They measure along the road. I just make my last point that you could have two buildings the same distance from a park, but depending on the size of the parcel, it knocks one building out. The results are arbitrary. I suggest lowered buffers and a hard cap if you're that concerned about what those lowered buffers would lead to.
Thank you. Thank you, John. All right, others wish to be heard?
Good evening, Commissioners. Mike Colehouse, 1507 Fremont, West Side, First Ward, local business owner, occasional pain in the you-know-what. I'm just going to talk briefly about this. From my standpoint, this is an industry that I'd love to get involved with. I see the 42 or the 41 parcels that are available as an extreme impediment to being able to get involved. I think that the only thing that will result is out-of-state businesses from California and from Colorado will come in and swoop in and be able to outbid because of years in the industry. Another thing that I've heard a lot of is the comparison to 37 pharmacies currently operating in the city and comparing that to the 41 potential parcels that are available. I do think, number one, our city's underserved in pharmacies, that there are a lot of communities that would like a pharmacy. I know there isn't one in downtown Grand Rapids at all, and I know that there's a big need with all the development we've had there. I also think that pharmacies are supplied through a ginormous supply chain of developers, of medicines, from research and development to processing to packaging, that all go into all that. The last point I'd like to make is about a small company in the early 1900s that started out, had 20 locations in the city of Chicago, and then in 1919, Prohibition started. And that company was able to get one of the few licenses to sell medicinal alcohol. And in 10 years, that company boomed up to 525 locations. And that company is Walgreens. And I would love for Grand Rapids to have a homegrown Walgreens that could be an industry that we could have their corporate headquarters in and have an additional billion-dollar industry in the region. That would be just something that would be amazing for us, for our children, for potential, for the next 100 years here. So I want to thank you guys for the time, and I hope you guys support the Planning Commission's ordinance. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Good to see you.
You too.
All right, others who wish to be heard? Hi, welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Gregory Hatt, and I represent the interests of Purple East, Integra CBD, and the patients of Michigan. I would like to urge you today
I'm sorry, Gregory, did you say where you live?
I did not. I live in Grand Rapids, actually, in Creston. So
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And I'd just like to advocate on the behalf of patients that you give them an opportunity to have safe access here in Grand Rapids. I talk to people every single day, multiple people every day, who are making 2-hour trips that are expensive and time-consuming to Lansing. Why isn't this city taking care of its sick people, its dying people, its hurting people? Why aren't we giving them an opportunity to get their medicine here? And I speak to you also from a business standpoint, because I would like to open up businesses in this community. If you choose that restrictive model, you rule most of us out of business. We have on the table this restrictive model and this unlimited model. Can we please meet somewhere in the middle so that we can all flourish and thrive, and the needs of the patients here in Michigan can be met? Thank you for your time and your energy in determining how to handle these new things in our community. But let's think about the sick people, the hurting people, the people with cancer. You think someone with cancer should be driving 2 hours to Lansing, battling traffic to go get meds in Lansing? I don't. I think Grand Rapids should be providing that service for them right here in our home. I think we owe it to the people here. So please think with your heart as well as with your wallet, because this is going to be good for the city financially. We're going to make a lot of money. We can do a lot of things with this money. We can invest in our infrastructure. We can invest in our parks, in our schools, in our families, in our community. There's a lot we can do with this. There's huge potential. Let's follow the lead of places like Colorado and California that are raking in tax dollars and doing amazing things with it. Grand Rapids can be like that too. We can be a leader in this way. Are you ready for that? Are you willing to do that? I'm ready. I'm willing to be one of the people who works with you, who does this together, not alone. I don't want to fight you anymore. As a young man, I used to try and fight the system a lot. I'm over that. Now I'd rather be the change I wish to see in the world. And so here I come before you asking you that favor. Please allow me to serve the people of our community who are sick, who are dying, who are hurting. There's probably someone in your family I'll end up serving. probably someone you know. I've witnessed seizures be stopped with CBD in front of my face in 30 seconds. You know, I've witnessed people beat cancer with this medicine. I've watched people who feel like they couldn't walk, feel like they can dance. I know young boys with cerebral palsy who couldn't use the right side of their body who have regained use. I hear stories like these every single day. You don't. You need to listen to the people like me who are in this industry, who are bleeding for this industry every day of our lives. Because we have information that you need to know, and we're here and we're ready to work together, so please work with us. Don't restrict us out. Don't restrict your people out of help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gregory. All right, others who wish to be heard? Hi,
Hello.
welcome.
Jamie Cooper. I live in Grand Haven. I also own 2 businesses specific to the cannabis industry, a networking and connection platform, as well as a marketing company. Mayor Bliss, I shared the list as a top 50 most influential women with you, and I see why you were on that list after attending today's meeting. I am a medical marijuana patient myself. My dad died of pancreatic cancer just a little over a year ago, and he used medical marijuana to treat himself illegally, unfortunately, in Texas, and it really helped him. And then my mom, I almost lost her to opiate addiction a little over a year ago, and I almost lost her again a few months ago. And CBD has now changed her life. And CBD in Michigan is now regulated a lot like THC. 4 years ago, I moved here from Colorado. I met my husband who grew up in West Michigan, and I was there for the big legalization boom. And as soon as I came here, I realized that I needed to be a part of this. This was something that just really changed my perspective living in Colorado and seeing it happen. And then 3 years ago, I started a chapter for an organization called Women Grow, helping women entrepreneurs get involved and start businesses in the cannabis industry. My chapter was right here in Grand Rapids. And so I've been dealing with the cannabis business industry here in West Michigan for the last 3 years. And then a year ago, and in that one of my meetings, we had a panel on talking about autism, medical cannabis for autism. And that night, my life changed. I felt drawn to the topic. Little did I know that 1 year ago that my son would be diagnosed. He was diagnosed with autism, diagnosed recently with malnutrition and anorexia, and it's a sensory processing disorder. And there's knowing what I know, not that everyday person knows what I know, but knowing what I know that it can change his life. Yesterday, autism was added as a qualifying condition, and I was a part of those efforts, and I'm just so grateful for that decision. There are 50,000 autism patients here in Michigan. DeVos Children's Hospital has been amazing in helping my son. We have an MRI scheduled Monday there. And there are doctors there that are very interested in doing some research and helping with this effort. I just want to state that we are not reinventing the wheel. There have been 9 other states that have gone recreational, and there are almost 40 states that have some sort of medical program. So this is not something new to our country. We have the opportunity to learn and develop our program from other states. There are 300,000 patients, obviously about 30,000 in the region. I want you to think of the economic impact. I have been involved in the business community in Grand Rapids, and the economic impact goes beyond these licenses. This industries it takes to support this whole industry is really valuable and growing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. Hi, welcome.
Hi, I'm Dave Overholt, Sydney, Michigan, local farmer. I run a dispensary in Grand Rapids on Leonard Street till it was raided. I've heard a lot of talk about money here today and a lot of business. I've heard a lot of people talk about the patients and the people that this is all for. I'm a veteran, broken neck, all for 90 milligrams of OxyContin, 9 years. I've been free of any narcotics for over 10 years now. I've been up in front of the commission here quite a few times asking to do this a long time ago, and we're finally here. So I'd like to say thank you for everybody for at least addressing it finally. One of the things that comes to my thoughts just standing here in line is how many people have addressed the Planning Commission's version, but I haven't heard one person endorse Susan's plan. So that, I find that hard to believe that all these people could be so wrong and one person or the group could be so right. Another thing I'd like to talk about really quickly is there's approximately 10,000 patients in the Kent County area, approximately 5,000, 4,000 to 5,000 in Grand Rapids area. Several years ago, I went rounds with Susan over home occupation zoning for growers under the MMA, which you passed. And after 10 years of this zoning ordinance, where farmers that would take care of their patients would have to have inspections by building inspectors, electricians, firemen, hazmat, I believe. Right now we have 5,000 patients in Grand Rapids and one licensed grower in the city of Grand Rapids. So either he's the richest guy in Grand Rapids or he's the busiest, one of the two. If we're here to really regulate this, this is the kind of things that you're here to do to stop from happening. We've decriminalized. Are we still fining these people then when we find out they don't have the zoning? Are we putting them in jail for this? I don't know where we're going as a city. But when we have regulations and we have these zonings in place, and you only have one person out of 10 years following the rules, it doesn't seem like those rules are working really well and probably should have been looked at a long time ago. And that's what it feels like what's happening if we follow the plan of Susan's and not the commission. You have to give this an opportunity to happen. You have to give it an opportunity to grow, just like the dispensaries evolved. If you all remember, the governor said there would be no dispensaries that would be allowed to stay open until the rules came in. Well, there's grandfathered dispensaries. So it did evolve, and they are here. And the crime rate didn't go up. There wasn't a rush of bad people in these places and people out front. So if you give the opportunity, the state of Michigan will regulate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. All right, others wish to be heard?
Good evening, my name is Rachel Lee. I am a resident in the 2nd Ward, and that's why I'm here. I'm here to support most of the Planning Commission recommendations over the Planning Department's recommendations. I do have a couple of questions in regards to why the 1,000 feet from a child care center and the 1,000 feet from a publicly owned park or playground. I think it would be wise for the city to stick along the lines with like alcohol uses as far as like within like the 500-foot rule over a 1,000-foot rule. 1,000 feet, the city planning department uses 250 feet as a city block, so 1,000 feet is 5 city blocks that we're talking about, which then makes it much more restrictive with that 1,000 foot. Also, in regards to the, once again, it's 500 feet from a church for the alcohol use, and it's 1,000 feet. So that's why I support the Planning Commission's recommendations. I understand that it's a state law for the public or private K through 12 school. I do find that interesting. My children, go to school where there's a brewery right across the street, and that brewery is an excellent partner in our school and has been nothing but a positive impact. I feel like a lot of the language and a lot of stuff that we're hearing is trying to avoid negative adverse impacts instead of talking about the positive impacts that the Planning Commission's recommendations can do for our urban business districts. The 250 feet from a residential zone district, once again, the city was built on a mix of commercial districts built within residential districts. So if you did that, if the 250 feet from the residential zone district would pass, that would eliminate so many properties out of the TBA zones because traditional business areas are built surrounded by residential districts. So once again, that's why I'm supporting the Planning Commission's recommendations. And then the 600 feet from another facility, I think is interesting. A lot of the stuff I saw across the state was 500 feet. So once again, I think that it would be nice to be more consistent with those numbers. And as a resident, I'm excited to see what this impact could have on our urban business districts with some of the provisioning centers, with the storefronts. A lot of buildings in our urban business districts are sitting empty, and this is an industry that can help revitalize some of those empty buildings. And I look forward to the City Commission passing this with the Planning Commission's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi, welcome.
Hi, everybody tonight. Nathaniel Dufine, 3rd Ward resident. I'm also a medical cannabis patient. And so, let's start out with the status quo. A child today could walk into any liquor store in the city, they could walk into any grocery store in the city, drugstore, and they could go without any store clerk seeing them. They could go to the cooler, they could pull out a Monster, a Red Bull, or a coffee. A small child, 8-year-old, could pull out 3 of those, steal them right under the store owner's nose. Not that I'm saying kids are going to do this, but they could steal those caffeinated beverages, which are perfectly legal and not put on any setback versus any other type of building. And that child could die. And this is extremely rare that someone dies of a caffeine overdose, but it happened, I want to say, maybe in 2017 to a child in the United States of America. Now, are we going to go putting setback restrictions on, liquor stores? Obviously, they already have them, but, grocery stores, your Meijer store, your drug store, because they got the deadly drug caffeine or acetaminophen. Okay, I haven't heard any pharmacologists up here. I don't know, maybe the Planning Commission did take pharmacology reports. Cannabis has been on the medical pharmacology for thousands of years. There's not a single recorded death. They can't even find the LD50, which is the rate at which 50% of the test subjects die. You can't die from it. So even if the kid who somehow truant from school in the first place, parents didn't get him to the school didn't, watch him, he somehow bangs down the door of this dispensary, and then the security guard is asleep, and all the bud tenders are asleep too. He climbs over the counter and gets a bunch of weed cookies, and even if he eats them, he's still not going to die. So can anyone in this room tell me why? And the same thing with the church. I mean, who goes to church with their mom and the kid's like, oh, look at that green leaf on that store, Mommy. Let's go get some stuff. I mean, this is just, it's ridiculous. It really challenges a common sense. And so, yeah, I read Crane's Detroit Business, okay? A lot of people don't. I'm on a board of a co-op business. They don't know how business works. Okay, Crane's Detroit has done articles about how wealthy building owners who happen to own, a warehouse in Troy or Warren that's within the magic zone, how they're charging triple, quadruple the rent just because they can. So if you guys aren't trying to set up some kind of a real estate cabal where you or your friends can profit from this, and I'm not saying you are, I'm saying if that were the case, we're going to investigate, we're going to find out who owns these properties, we're going to find out who has the golden keys, and that information is going to get out, guys. So, no one in this room can tell me why a cannabis dispensary has to be 1,000 feet from a school, and nobody in this room can tell me why patients with cancer and other debilitating diseases have to drive 60 miles to Lansing. I appreciate your time. You guys do have a tough job. You got a lot of idiot airheads like me talking, but please, let's make sense. Let's get rid of these setbacks, and let's adopt the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Nathaniel. All right, others who wish to be heard?
I really don't know how to follow that one. You're all right. My name's John Frederick.
Oh, please, no clapping, please.
My name's John Frederick, and I live in Cannon Township. But I've worked for you guys for the last 33 years as a firefighter. I can say the opioid overdose situation here, in the first 30 years I worked for you guys, I couldn't count on one hand how many times I ran on an overdose. The last 3 years, 8 months, I couldn't count how many times I ran on them. It is just going rampant. You could always tell when a new product came into town, we were running crazy. I worked at ladder 3, I worked at ladder 1, truck 2, engine 5. I retired out of 3s last April. I'm a grower, and I crafted, my nephew and I have crafted special products for Parkinson's disease that we've seen work. We've had Tourette's, kids with Tourette's come to us, parents, and we've treated them all legally. We have cancer stuff that we treat people with. We have all different other stuff that we've crafted. And when I look at the bill and look at what they've adopted over here, it's going to limit little guys like us, little guys like are all in the room here, and it's just going to take the big guys coming in. You talked about a good neighbor plan. You know, all my boys, I grew up here. My boys all played baseball out at Northview there by the vets facility. And I saw K Pharmacy, local, good neighbor, plan, sponsor teams. Grand Rapids Auto Parts, sponsor teams. But I've never saw Walgreens sponsor teams. I never saw TGI Fridays sponsor teams. It was always the local guys that did it. And I think by going by this side here, those guys ain't gonna be good neighbors. They're gonna come in here, they're gonna rake the money out of us. They're gonna put little guys like us out of business. And it's not gonna be for the little guy. This plan over here, I don't understand 1,000 feet from public schools or anything like that, because there's liquor stores close to them. There's breweries close to them. And if people ran it that were good neighbors, they're gonna know when a kid shows up and say, get the heck out. We're not servicing you. There's not gonna be that stuff, and the way I look at it, but that's my 2 cents. So, thank you much.
Thank you, John. Good to see you, and thank you for your service. Appreciate you.
My name is Paul Mayhew, and I live at 244 Heritage Commons in Grand Rapids, 3rd Ward. I'm proud that we're finally getting to this particular point, but I'm also a little perplexed that we're here and who I don't see in this audience in a large form. Now, I'm a vet, have dealt with PTSD, so it's pretty rough. PTSD caught me, and I used to have to stay in the house because I had to dry shave in the Army, and that was pretty rough. But who I don't see, and what I don't want to see happen, is a whole community that have helped to set this up by going to prison, sitting in the prisons, being extra slaves for the state, get left out. So I'm talking for that group of people that has the potential to get left out, but then they also help to build this industry on its back by getting busted for seeds, ridiculous stuff. Marijuana paper in their cars and stuff, going to do 10 years and 15 years in prison for a joint. Now, we have did the ridiculous, but our folks are still afraid that something's gonna happen to them. Even though we got all this legalese and everybody doing what's supposed to be right and legal, we feel that, hey man, you go up there, you know they're gonna be talking, but it ain't gonna go for you. So anyway, I wanna prick your conscience to be able to look out for that. Look out for somebody sitting in here can look out for our community, because we need it. In terms of autism and the whole mental health spectrum needs this. Not just autism that one of the governor's candidates ushered in, the autism, but then you got schizophrenia, you got personality disorder, you got all these other disorders out there that need this. You know, not just autism. I do support the majority of the Planning Commission's recommendations. I think that the flexibility is what I'm looking for. Flexibility in terms of how are those afros gonna be treated in this game.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yep.
Thanks. All right, others who wish to be heard?
Martha Cooper, Grand Rapids citizen. So I speak up a lot for people that have struggles with housing. I wanted to piggyback on something that he said in the times when this was and still is considered, a first drug. Then it's kind of like we've seen people being jailed for this, fined for this. If they have a drug conviction, they're not allowed to have public housing. These things. Oh, and another thing was two little roaches in my son's pocket kept him from getting a Pell Grant. I'm talking about there has been generations of hurt that has happened because of governments. You are our local government. We're asking you, all of us here, to do the right thing. You have an indicator from the vote to decriminalize it of how the people in this town feel. This town has a zillion breweries that were once regulated to like an industrial thing, but now they're having pizza with it so they can have a bar. We have so many of those things. I also want to say that I am 9 years sober, and you have this thing in there saying that you can't have it next to a rehab. I'll tell you something from my experience with the drug of alcohol and everyday occurrences. We are paying higher medical, insurance costs are higher. No, nobody's going, if they go to jail, they go to jail for a short time, and it never keeps them out of housing. And it hurts people, it kills their lives. Somebody, so this is a much bigger actual medical emergency. A child can die from too much alcohol. Any person can. So I also have had people in my life that were addicted not only to drugs or to alcohol, but to drugs. We have precious little focus on recovery. We don't treat this like it's a medical emergency, drug addiction. I've never seen anyone in my entire time I've ever once struggled through alcohol and the recovery, or anyone that was there for marijuana. So I also want to say, and I want to echo, that if you take out the equity thing, that's a real slap in the face to the Black community, as they have been incarcerated much more with a lot more damage to their families. And I want to see that turned around. And I've got 19 seconds to say to you that it is unconscionable. And I know a lot of people, and we're worried, most of us, about justice in this department, that when they legalize it, it's only going to be corporate. You are planning on getting 24% of the tax revenue, and yet you want to tax.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, others wish to be heard?
Hello, my name is David Sostek. I'm an attorney with Edward Allen. I live in Kentwood and own property in Grand Rapids. Wanted to start out by saying I'm not going to really touch on the medical uses. Prior comments have really made that invaluable. What I am a little bit shocked by is that I do obviously practice in this field, reviewed a lot of public comments, and the comments here are not negative. It is plan A versus plan B, one more restrictive, one not as restrictive. And there hasn't been anybody that's come up and said, no, this is bad, this is against morals, et cetera, et cetera. I've seen that in different communities. I'm not seeing it here. And personally, I'm surprised by that, and I think that's great. Other commentators have discussed the land, and of those 43 parcels that the original proposal or the original ordinance is drafted under, that will make that land incredibly more valuable. In addition to an attorney, I'm also a real estate broker, and for cannabis clients, I was helping them find property in Kalamazoo. It shot up almost, it was over 200% for the available parcels within zoning districts. And the available parcels towards the end of their application period, the landlords were not permitting the use. So on paper, those 43 parcels, maybe that's enough. Maybe, I heard a comparison to pharmacies. But if the people that own those 43 parcels say, no, I don't want it on my land, I'm personally against it, that number could be reduced by as much, I'm guessing here, let's just say half. So now you have 22 parcels. It's going to push out any local smaller business. And I say smaller because there's still an enormous amount of capital requirement to operate these facilities. Crime I think is a minimal concern. The Laura has security plans. There has to be check-in, there has to be cards verified. Kids aren't going to wander in and get access to marijuana. The city of Grand Rapids could greatly benefit because it's one of the few cities that has an income tax, and because marijuana businesses can't deduct many of their expenses because of IRS Section 280E, you're basically getting a much larger share than you otherwise would until federal regulations change. And I would also add a severability clause in the ordinance
Thank you,
in case
David.
things change in the future.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Hello, welcome.
I'm Bob Hendricks. I live at 2109 Robinson Road in Grand Rapids Township. I'm a lawyer here in town. I practice with the law firm of Wrigley, Hoffman, and Hendricks, and I've practiced law in this community and in West Michigan for 34 years. 2 years ago, when Governor Snyder signed the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act, I saw my practice change to the extent that I began to attend municipal meetings and talk with municipalities about their options under the opt-in ordinance. And I'll tell you, it's one of the most interesting and gratifying experiences in my practice to see this nocturnal democracy at work. It's really amazing that this happens throughout our state, many nights of the week throughout the year. And tonight, I sat and listened to many comments that really were democracy in action. So first I want to thank the mayor, the commissioners, and the other members of the city officials for taking on this very important task. What we're not here to do tonight is talk about or consider the presence or absence of marijuana in our communities. We all know that marijuana is in every community in our country. I'm here to support the orderly regulation of medical marijuana, to urge the best method for access to the patients who our voters in 2008, by a 64% margin, said were entitled to have access to medical marijuana to deal with their medical conditions, many of which you've heard about tonight. And I'm here to assist in what I think will help to remove medical marijuana from the black market if we do this right. We are very pleased that the city is moving toward adopting an opt-in ordinance. But our deepest concerns are the limits placed by the various proximity limits that are in both the planning director's recommended ordinance as well as the planning commission's ordinance. Now, I think the planning commission, I attended the meeting where they considered this question with Director Schultz, and I think almost every one of them spoke in a way that indicated that they were clearly aware that what we were talking about here is medical marijuana. The access to this product is not recreational. The access is limited to patients and caregivers, if they have access at all. And that's only for provisioning centers. All the other facilities are going to have guards on the doors, locks and keys, etc. So these proximity limits, I heard another gentleman earlier tonight talk about kind of the challenge that they face really isn't a challenge at all. We have natural boundaries, we have man-made boundaries that will keep people away from most of these facilities. And so I urge you to think carefully about those proximity limits. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. All right, others wish to be heard? Hi, welcome.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Erin Lammers. I'm a representative of Damascus Consulting and Development, a government relations firm in Lake Orion, and we represent clients in Grand Rapids, on the west side, and across the state. I'd like to thank the City Commission, the Planning Commission, and all other parties who have contributed their time and effort to create an effective and successful medical marijuana facilities ordinance that best fits the City of Grand Rapids. I applaud the recommended decision to not cap facilities at a limiting number, but to instead rely on zoning, less restrictive buffer requirements, and the nature of free market business. Less restrictive buffer requirements in regard to provisioning centers especially will encourage economic development opportunities by increasing foot traffic to nearby businesses, which is positive for local business growth. Less restrictive buffers also encourage lower vacancy rates in various property lots, as they will be easier to obtain. Around 100 municipalities in Michigan have opted in, and hundreds more are having discussions daily on the road to opting in. And this would be a wonderful opportunity for Grand Rapids to be a leader on the west side and in the state of Michigan as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, others wish to be heard?
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Callie Melton. I live in Casnovia, and I just came up here to tell you all that I'm working with For Our Future, which is a 501c4 that advocates on issues. That's why I was filming the hearing tonight on the marijuana issue. But as a private citizen, I thought I would just weigh in on a few points that I think people in the community have brought up. Less is more, I feel, on marijuana dispensaries, but you don't want to, you want to bring light to the black market. And I think that's a key piece that the previous gentleman had just brought up. The drug dealers that sell our children drugs that kill them, they don't care about 600 feet or 1,000 feet from schools or daycare centers. Your dispensaries will. So, you know, maybe some of these rules need to be flexed a little bit. I don't have any skin in the game because I don't live here, but it's nice to see that things in Grand Rapids are changing and that trickles out into other communities where I live. So that's all I have to say, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Good to see you. All right, others wish to be heard?
Hello.
Hi, welcome.
I'm Cynthia Beers. I live in Walker by like 1 block. And I guess I'm just kind of concerned about the equity in this. It sounds like another gentrification scheme to me. We have all of these consultants and all of these people who've been in place. It's amazing. And this would be a perfect opportunity to help people in poverty, help people get a leg up, as somebody just said. It's really important. You know, I'm a medical marijuana card holder. I had to go all the way to Lansing, but I went to a mom and pop store in Lansing on Michigan Avenue, and I felt so good about helping their business. Of course, they went out because they couldn't afford the licensing fees. But it makes a big difference to me as a user that I'm also supporting a community, that I'm also supporting somebody who didn't have a lot of money before and was kind of trying and doing a very good job. So that's all I really have to say, but, you know, thank you, though, for listening and bringing this whole matter up and supporting the community.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. All right, others wish to be heard?
Hello, Russell Olmsted, West Side, Grand Rapids. On the discussion this evening, I agree with everything that the community has been saying, but one thing that I haven't heard spoken about a lot yet is the fee, the $5,000 fee that these businesses to start up would need to put forward, and I'm not sure. I can't say for certain on whether or not it is a reoccurring fee, but if it is a reoccurring fee and not just a startup fee, even if it is just a startup fee, that's a huge disadvantage to put people into and getting into this industry. And when we, again, to the lady's point who just spoke, when we're trying to consider equitable outcomes, putting that type of barrier at the beginning can really affect who can get into this industry. And I know that property values are and those aspects of this are also problematic in this proposal, but I think that this is another area that is also very problematic in it. The tax revenue that's going to be brought in off of this that the city is going to be getting is going to be more than enough to be able to pay for any sort of regulatory issues that the city is going to have with this ordinance. It's going to be way more than enough. As more and more, this is going to promote the growth of more people actually going out and getting medicinal marijuana cards because they don't have to drive 60 miles to actually get medicine. So that also is going to result in growing this industry and more revenue for the city. So again, it will allow the city to be able to pay for this without that fee. I don't see the purpose of it, and it's going to. I feel it will only help to disadvantage those who can't necessarily afford that sort of fee and cause more inequity in this industry. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Russ. All right, others wish to be heard? Hi, welcome.
Hello, Mayor Bliss. I'm Tennille Harkness, First Ward. I want to say thank you, first of all, for awarding me my proclamation for lupus. So I do have autoimmune disease. I'm speaking on behalf of Smart and Safe GR. I am a committee member on behalf of advocating for medical marijuana. I'm more of a different type of advocate, though. I'm more for the CBD. I'm not sure if you even know that they have CBD water. It doesn't get you high. It soothes me. They also have the rubs, you know, for the pain, you know, just in case you don't want to, you might not want to be a pill taker, or you might not want to have Bengay smelling like that. But in reality, I'm very impressed with the outcome of the positive feedback that you all are receiving tonight in favor of medical marijuana. The recreational is something new right now, but the medical is medication. We also can get our medical cards right here in Grand Rapids. So why would we need to go get our medication somewhere else? This is a city that has been forthcoming in supporting local. Why not continue? I was 16 years old and I met a lady that had HIV. And she told me then that weed, marijuana, took away her pain. I was 16. I'm 16 plus and more since then. I've been listening across a lot of different situations with everybody, veterans, friends, even coworkers I didn't even know that supported. Some people didn't even know I supported. But it's a time that Grand Rapids, King County needs to step forward and let us not suffer anymore for getting our medication. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tennille. All right, others wish to be heard?
Hello, my name's Dan O'Brien. I lived in Kent County for my whole life. It's approximately 34 years. Primarily in Alpine Township and Plainfield Township. I have a few different family members that are battling cancer, fibromyalgia, and autoimmune diseases. We've all been exposed to cancer-causing contaminants through our water, and now we're being denied our cancer doctor-recommended medication, as well as our voter-approved medication within our jurisdiction. We've been fighting for access for years with no really hope in sight other than within the past couple months. You guys took it up in your power to address it, which I greatly appreciate. I stand here today in support of the Planning Commission's recommendation. I think that would be the best for this city. If we leave it up with the 41 parcels available, that's just going to bring in big corporations that are just going to take it over and want to make a bunch of money off the sickness of others, and we don't want that. I don't think we should limit caregivers to be able to get into this framework, this legal framework. Every caregiver is different, and they all have different products and different strains that help with different patients' alignments and debilitating conditions. I would like to make one other point. Here in Kent County, we are in an opiate crisis and a cancer crisis as well. We did have dispensaries back in 2016. They were all simultaneously raided and shut down. Coincidentally, the year after, opiate overdose deaths raised by 67% and suicides by 12%. Medical marijuana provides pain relief to many people, and I believe that there should be some sort of option to provide safe access for our constituents and quit cuddling up to the prohibitionists. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. All right, others wish to be heard?
Hi, thank you. My name is Misty Eves. I'm Granville resident, Kent County. I've been to a majority of all these meetings advocating from a patient perspective for myself and my son, but for others here in the county, veterans, but also pediatrics. My son was diagnosed with epilepsy this last year, and it has been a crazy year. And he has fell subject to Big Pharma and is on, when I first spoke at the first planning commission, he was on 14 pills. Since that, he's on additional 2, and we're gonna be going 2 more. We have no outlet. My kid can't even toilet himself at 12 years old because of pharmacy, Big Pharma. The side effects of those medications that we're forcing our public on have terrible side effects. It's not a good quality of life. You know, we can keep going back and forth on this. You've seen nothing but positive stuff. We have kids that need your help. We have DeVos that is right here. I can't advocate enough how here we are 10 years later and we have nothing. I know you guys have RAC coming up. I know that's a big concern of yours, but I think servicing your patients, especially your pediatric patients, that should be maybe like #1 priority. As far as I'm concerned, yellow, this is your medical ordinance, and this is your recreational ordinance. It can be that simple. Our kids are waiting for you, and it's not fair. It's really not fair, but thank you for your time, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Misty. All right, others wish to be heard?
How are you guys doing tonight? My name is Jonah Resnowski. I live in Creston neighborhood. I'm a disabled vet. I help other vets with PTSD and severe alcoholism get off of alcohol. I've also been a caregiver for years, and I'm the business development director of a cannabis company down in Kalamazoo. With the new 11 qualifying conditions that were approved today, you're going to see a huge influx in the application for medical patient cards, and I'm advocating for the Planning Commission's recommendation. You're going to need to be able to support those new influx of applications. So just have to be ready for the future, especially with what got approved today. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, others wish to be heard? Hi.
I'm Pat DeWinter. I live in Wyoming. You have the ability to grant your licenses to people from Michigan. It's kind of a radical idea, but you do have that ability. You don't have to go first come, first serve. I think it would be really important that you educate yourself on the process of getting a license through LARA. If you can survive that, you can survive anything. Been there, done that. It is awful. Meaning you have detectives following you, the money requirements. So it's not like you're getting riffraff. If they pass that, they should be able to pass through you. It should be no problem. I think no matter how you vote, you need to use all the locations, period. Otherwise, you're just asking for big money. I mean, it's already like $28,000 to get a processing license by the time you're done. So the locations are going to become super important. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. Appreciate that.
Hi, John Rothwell, 2nd Ward. This is a potential game changer for the city of Grand Rapids. There are numerous non-card holders that use medical marijuana in this town because they don't want to travel to Lansing to get it. There's also the opioid epidemic that comes in there that I've seen many people addicted to and lost numerous friends to. I've been sober from alcohol for over 14 years. I can probably count the number of times I've used illegal marijuana on both hands in my entire life, but it's becoming a game changer. I have a very conservative doctor, And I mess with him just like I mess with him with my sarcastics. And every time I walk into my doctor's office, I ask for an ESA letter and my medical marijuana card, and I get told hell no both times. Well, last time I walked in there, he told me no on the ESA letter, but he told me come back in 3 months on the medical marijuana. I might give it to you, but try CBD oil on my knee. And this was somebody who was changing with this, so it's become a change, and we need to make it more accessible to people. As far as the limits, I walk into a park and I trip over wine bottles and broken 20-ounce bottles that were bought from the party store across the street. I'm sure paper residue is going to be burned in that park if it's used in that park, so I don't see anything there. Places are going to be well guarded, and I just hope that the city takes this a step and prepares itself for recreational use only. And I know Susan Schultz says we're going to have to be addressing this in probably 6 months after it passes. Because you look around this room here, and I'm going to say over 90% of this people at one time or another have done something illegal as far as weed goes. And I'll go to bed on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Hello, Commissioner.
Hello,
welcome.
Mayor, and to the City Commission. I'm Kent County Commissioner Robert S. Womack. I live on the southeast side of Grand Rapids. I didn't really want to speak. I've heard a lot of things tonight, and I feel we got a great plethora of advice from the community. But I did want to talk about equal access and speak up for some of my constituents that may not have made it here tonight. When it comes to equal access, and we think about the 42 parcels that are available, once I saw that map, I took a ride around to look at some of those areas, and there wasn't much available in those areas. But when we talk about equal access, and I'm speaking on the medical marijuana, because we don't know what's going to happen in November, but I'm concerned with medical marijuana, the fact that if you live on Division and Hall or Franklin and Eastern and you have to drive all the way to Ann Street, or if you live near Plainfield Street on the northeast side and you have to go all the way to the west side, or you have to go all the way to 28th Street. I just believe communities for medical marijuana is passed through the state. I think that this map, I knew when I saw the first one with 200 to 300 parcels, I knew the city of Grand Rapids probably wasn't going to go for that, but I was shocked that it went down to just those 42. And me looking at those parcels, it just doesn't give equal access. Someone else mentioned also that traffic will bring money to different areas. When we look at the microbreweries, they're mostly on the west side, downtown, they're everywhere except the southeast side of town or the southwest side of town. And that is drawing more business to those areas, as some of the business districts in my area are dying. They're not being able to be a part of this Grand Rapids growth. So I just think equal access is going to give more equity, whether those communities are involved directly with the medical marijuana, whether they're involved with the microbreweries. It just gives an equal opportunity for those other businesses to thrive off of those businesses. And if you think about getting an aspirin today from your house or some medicine for your child, and you thought, okay, I've got to go all the way to the industrial area of Ann Street. When we're talking about medical marijuana, those benefits are real, as you've heard about that tonight. So that equal access is just something I wanted to put here on the docket today to be in consideration by our great city commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Good to see you. All right, anyone else who wishes to be heard on this topic? And then I'm going to close this opportunity and we'll go on to the next because we still have a few more things on our agenda. So Mr. Miller, I'm going to let you be the last one.
Some of the potheads are leaving, but...
Mr. Miller, talk to us,
We'll be sick all the way through.
We want to hear what you have to say.
What's Miller back? Again, this looks like another totally rigged process. Why do they know about this? And I mean, the cannabis industry and marijuana, how did they find out about this? And conservatives, Christian conservatives, know nothing about this. going back in history after the military, and and went over Europe for 7 years, and I decided to do some research in American Information Center. Read a book or two on it. Marijuana has always been considered an entryway drug. We already have a burden on the police in town, and almost every opportunity I brought before you that we are under-policed. How can we possibly take this additional burden of marijuana, favoring marijuana? It's a problem for senior citizens. I don't see how the senior complexes were notified of this problem, and where a place where I live, I give it back because there's marijuana in there, and the federal laws they're trying to follow the federal laws in the last two complexes where I've lived, and why should we have to put up? If somebody is that much interested in cannabis, then they should be picking up our rents. We don't want marijuana smoke in our units, which are common HVAC vents, and there was some commitment of Commissioner Lanier to address this smoking problem earlier in the year. This is, again, it's not just a problem of secondhand smoke, but third-hand smoke, sticking, as a press covered the other day, sticking to clothing, upholstery, walls. Months later, a room occupied by a smoker can effectively expose the same HVAC. Months later, happening in apartment buildings. I probably have more to say about this a little bit later. But why is only one constituency, the so-called cannabis industry, covered here? So the police don't have only 300 officers to handle this extra burden, and my last opportunity, I'll come forward again to address the rest of us. We shouldn't have, and then one other thing which I wasn't aware of, which my colleague left earlier, there's also a problem. These plants apparently stink. Okay, so how do you regulate that? I mean, why should they be going in a neighborhood? What other agricultural plants stink besides cannabis or hemp or what do you want to call it? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Miller. All right, I'm going to close that public hearing, and that'll be referred back to our committee of the whole. So next, that will take us to our last opportunity for public comment tonight. So if you are here to speak about anything else, this is an opportunity to speak about anything that's on your heart or your mind that you want to share with us. Here's your opportunity to come forward. Same rules apply. We ask that you share your name and the city that you live in, and you'll be given up to 3 minutes to speak. Are you coming on up? Oh, are you coming to speak? Okay, yeah, please do. Okay.
Hey, I'm still a Philmall. I still live on the west side. Still going to get buried in the northeast side. Anyway, I thought I had one more opportunity to speak before you talked about the one thing. I wanted to share something, especially with your rebuttal to my comment about the grade, the people in the margin. I had some staff go through the first, just alphabetically, the first 200 units of approved, the current occupants. And so every one of you, just in your mind, real quick, think of what you think a fair cutoff for a FICO score would be, okay? FICO goes from 300 to 850. If you just think of okay, you got that in your head. Right now,
to interrupt, Mayor, I can't hear the gentleman, so can we get someone in the hall to quiet that down, and can you speak in the microphone a little bit better for us to make sure that everyone can hear?
Unfortunately, we have to leave the door. We have to leave the door open because it's a public meeting. But we will if someone. I thought I saw somebody. Okay, thank you.
All right.
So I don't know who's doing the time, I'm gonna restart the time for you because you waited a long time to be heard. You deserve to be heard. Okay.
Well,
go
actually,
ahead.
with all that speaking of marijuana, I did sneak out and get a Snickers.
Repeat your name again, too, for the clerk, please. She was asking for that.
Oh, Philip Mall.
Thank you.
Anyway, FICO rates from 300 to 850. Just quickly in your head, think of a number that you think would be an appropriate cutoff for a tenant to be approved or disapproved. Now with that, I took the first, just alphabetically, 200 units that I manage that are currently occupied. Right now, 1% has an 800 plus score. 2.2 have a 740 to 799. 3.3, these are percentages, okay, okay, from 670 to 739. Now we're probably starting to get close to your number. 11% had a 580 to 669. 20% had a 450 to 579. 2% had a 300 to 499. Now you're doing your math going, hold it, that doesn't add up to 100%. 22.2 had insufficient score, and I really don't know what that is, and the 37.8 had no score on their credit reports. Okay, so no matter what your number was of an appropriate number for me to have set for a cutoff without doing a tedious process of adjudicating whether they should be in a unit or not, more than 50, whatever 37.8 plus 22.2 is, had no score at all, and yet I still rented to them. But that's going to have to change starting November 7th, it sounds like. I'm going to start tomorrow trying to figure out where this sweet spot's going to be. But 50% of those people that I've already rented to are going to end up being automatically denied at this point. So I just needed to share that because I'm befuddled. And if you really want to talk to me later about it, I'm all ears.
Absolutely.
So, okay, I'll send you an email.
Please. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. All right, others who wish to be heard?
Russ Olmsted, West Side. There's nothing in the ordinance that says that you have to cut somebody off on a certain FICO score. It still is completely up to the discretion of the landlords to decide what criteria they're going to use. All they have to do now is disclose that criteria rather than keep it internal. So whatever FICO score they wanted to use before, they could use now. All this does is put whatever quote-unquote character you have into the light so that you can hopefully back that up. So that's it.
Thank you, Russ, and thanks for working on this. All right, others who wish to be heard?
Good news, I'm not here to talk about marijuana tonight.
I don't know why that's good news, but okay.
I'm getting it's like it's 10:30.
I actually have 3 sets of good news. The second one is I come bearing a problem with 4 solutions, which I'm sure you don't always get, and I try to walk a certain talk, which is I've always made a problem requirement of having 3 solutions, and you're really not allowed to share it. I'm sorry that I can't say that about everything anymore, but I'm trying my best. The third item, which will be more levity for you, hopefully you'll allow me some discretion. I promise to keep it rated G. In the way of an analogy, I don't know if anybody's aware of the parable or the parody of the 2 bulls overlooking a pasture of cows that are walking away from them. The younger bull, eager but lacking experience, says to the old bull, "Hey, let's run down there and screw ourselves a cow." The old bull, having a lot more experience, turns to the younger bull and chuckles and says, "Nah, why don't we walk down there and screw them all?" If you would retain that for the next meeting, because I won't have enough time to expand on that particular.
Let's keep it clean, please.
I'm trying. I was trying to keep it clean. Hopefully, get you plugged back in at a long evening, so hopefully that worked a little bit. But anyway, the way I see it, the City Commission's role is to try to be the big bull. And I see it every time that you tend to stumble is what the little bulls have created before you. And not necessarily the commission, I'm talking in regards to the city. I'm not going to get time to this tonight, but that's okay. Well, I've been following up on the Prospect, Michigan traffic signal. By the way, Robert Metzger, East Grand Rapids, Michigan, 312 Prospect Avenue Northeast. The Prospect, Michigan traffic signal. I've experienced a number of material misrepresentations from staff in multiple city departments. I've even witnessed staff providing material support and assistance to Grand Valley State University as they work on their case against me in a private matter with city resources. I see these for what they are, little bulls caught doing what little bulls do. I know it for what it is, which is a failure of leadership. I've seen it before. I've even seen it in this chamber as I watched Mr. DeLong make a material representation of fact as to traffic studies that were done, even though his own department was well aware that those studies did not satisfy the requirement, nor the expectation of standard. That was further cemented by the fact that I had to use a FOIA request to get that study. I'm out of time, and I will let you guys get out of here tonight.
Thank you. All right, anyone else who wishes to be heard? Mr. Miller, you're coming up. You can tell we've been here since 7:30 a.m.
Also, Miller back on the pain issue, which I wanted to address, but it was rattled. What hospital, which deals with serious burn victims in the area or the region, would treat people with marijuana to help with the pain? Apparently, burns are the most severe pain of all, and they use stronger drugs. When this issue first came up some years ago, and some letters were still printed in the Grand Press, there was a very strong pushback from the medical professionals saying no, they have other forms which they can use instead of marijuana to deal with pain, which are legal. So let's kind of get their input and expertise on the record to see if it's true that marijuana is necessary to deal with pain. And again, it was a kind of a one-sided, it was interesting and informative, but it was a one-sided hearing. They knew about this, and the conservative Christian community did not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. All right, anyone else who wishes to be heard before we close up? Oh, sure. What do you need a copy of, sir? Oh, yeah. You can take that.
Awesome.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else? All right. I'm going to close that opportunity for public comment, and it'll take us to my colleagues. And I'll start with Commissioner Kelly.
Good night, everyone, and thank you for coming.
I heard that.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll turn to Commissioner Jones.
Yeah, I too want to wish everyone a good night. Thank you for coming out on this evening and really covering a multitude of issues and doing it in a very, I think, in a very productive way. So thank you.
Commissioner. All right. Commissioner Lanier?
Good night.
Commissioner Lanier, do you want to say who's moving forward for third
I
ward?
could. Yeah.
Some of us weren't in the subcommittee.
I didn't even know what to talk about. It's just so
Third
late.
ward
It's
city commission
hilarious.
seat?
That was like 2 days ago.
Yeah, like 2 days ago. So earlier today, the third ward candidates, commissioner candidates, were interviewed earlier today, and we narrowed down 9 candidates to 3. And the names of the 3 candidates are Joel. Can you answer those? So Nathaniel Moody,
Ryan Anderson, Austin Dean.
And so those are the 3 candidates that colleagues, I haven't even shared that with all of the colleagues, so that those will be the 3 candidates that will be interviewed on the 24th. And our final decision about the third ward commissioner candidate will be made on July 31st in the morning. So that's where we are. Thank you for the reminder.
You're welcome, and we'll add an opportunity for public comment on for our 7 p.m. meeting on the 24th.
And one last thing, if I can just give a shout out to Becky Jo for the snacks.
Mm-hmm.
She's not here, but she provided them earlier, and we've been rocking them out all night. So.
Thank you. So Commissioner Lanier and those who served on the subcommittee and the residents that joined for that process, just thank you for that. It'll be good to move forward. And then my last comment, I want to announce, and a press release will be going out about this later on, I think tonight. I'll look at Amy, she's saying yes. So just an update on our city manager search. So our consultant is in the process of doing some final vetting of the candidates that will be recommended for interviewing. And just to give you a heads up about the timeline and the dates, and we'll get this out so that people can get it on their calendars. We plan to make an announcement about the candidates who will be recommended to move forward for interviews. We'll talk about that at our Committee of the Whole meeting on July 24th. Our consultant will be here to talk about those candidates. So the names will be made public in the morning of the 24th. We will do interviews the next week. So we'll have a number of things during the day. We'll do tours with the candidates. We'll host a reception for city leadership and union leadership. We'll have a community forum the evening of July 30th at the downtown library. The following day on July 31st is when we will do interviews with the candidates. The full city commission will do that, starting in the afternoon, probably around 1 o'clock. And then the following week, we'll have a discussion after those initial interviews. And then the following week on August 7th, we'll do final interviews with the candidates we choose to move forward and cast a vote, hopefully that day on August 7th, so that we can move forward with that process. And then we'll have hopefully a full commission with all commissioners and a new city manager named by mid-August. So again, all the details for that will be going out in a press release so that people can get it on their calendars. Did I miss anything, City Attorney? All right, good. So anything to add? All right, and our interim city manager?
No, ma'am, no. All set. Thank you.
All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.